Well, hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Catherine Robinson.
And I'm Joe O'Brien. Our special coverage continues on ABC TV.
We're continuing our rolling coverage of this major tech outage that's been affecting companies not just here in Australia but around the world. If you're just joining us, let's bring you up to date on what we know so far. Computer security company CrowdStrike has been linked to the outage that is affecting banks, airports, supermarkets and businesses across Australia and the world. The outage is also affecting many media outlets, including here at the ABC. Flights have been grounded at airports in the United States as well as Europe.
And not just some flights. In the US, we're hearing that several major companies have been totally grounded. The full impacts of the outage is still being realised. Australia's cyber security coordinator says there's no information to suggest a cyber security incident or some kind of hack. Australia's National Emergency Mechanism Group is convening to respond to the issue. We've got reporters across the country tonight and in our international bureau who are following developments, and we'll keep bringing those to you.
Well, let's go to Perth now, where we're joined by reporter David Webber, who is in the CBD. Hi there, David. Can you take us through what's happening there?
Well, the major companies that you've heard about, the national companies, that's had an impact here in Perth. Just here at Woolworths, the check-in, the self-checkout aren't working. The self-checkouts there. I stepped in and there's a lot of people there at the checkouts, but not at the self. But the other businesses here in Murray Street Mall and others that we've been to, there's been no impact. They don't know anything about what we've been talking about. It's as boisterous and as busy as ever at this time of night. The banks seem to have just as many people as they would have in them, but we have heard of some other impacts. Now, St John WA Health Centres, the urgent care, have asked for people to be patient because they've been impacted. Ambulances are not impacted. Department of Fire and Emergency Services, there's been some impact, but apparently that's at the desk. It hasn't been impacting services as such. Check-ins at the airport have been affected, so there's long queues there, but no flight delays at this time. That was an update from Perth Airport about an hour ago. So manual check-ins, they're asking for people to turn up, give themselves a bit more time. Some car yards, some service stations have been closed down. And Woolworths self-checkout, as I mentioned before. I heard a story about a woman who got a text that she had a piece of furniture to pick up at a store. She went to the store and they couldn't provide it to her. She said there was panic there at the store because they couldn't use their computers. No impact from government departments, state government departments, as far as we know. The buses and trains are running okay. And yeah, as I say, I mean, there's no impact here in retail, but we have to wait and see what happens during the course of the evening.
Yeah, I mean, it is a mid-afternoon there for you in Perth there, David. We crossed to one of our reporters up in the Darwin just recently, and it seemed quite busy and there was some sort of frenetic energy there. What are you finding? How are people responding to this up there?
Well, people that I've spoken to didn't know what was going on. Some people come up and asked us what is happening, and we've just given the updates that I've given to you that have been provided to me from the people in the office, because the phones are still working and some of the emails are still working. So we're just passing on information to people. It's, as I say, in the streets, it hasn't really had an impact. Not yet, anyway. OK,
all right. Look, thanks for bringing us up to speed. David Webber in the Perth CBD.
Now, some of the worst affected companies appear to be airlines at this stage. We've heard what's happening in the US with several major companies. They're apparently grounding all their flights. We've had varying information on how Australian airlines are affected. We've actually got a statement from Virgin now. We'd had some reports about what was happening with Virgin, but nothing official. Virgin is saying operations are continuing following a large-scale IT outage impacting multiple airlines and other businesses. However, some cancellations and delays are expected. So that's the description of what's happening with Virgin. Some cancellations and delays expected. We're working to resolve any delays and get our guests on their way as quickly as possible. And we just heard from an IT expert this is for viewers who are only just joining us now because we've had rolling coverage for some time, but we've got the ABC main channel viewers with us now as well. She was saying that a fix has been organised. This company CrowdStrike
Potential Fix
was doing work on an update for Microsoft. Apparently that is the source of all this. And apparently CrowdStrike has come out now saying there is a potential fix, and so hopefully authorities and companies are going to be able to get on top of this, but we'll see what happens.
And untangle what is currently being quite a chaotic situation across businesses playing out through not just Australia but indeed the world. You mentioned that Virgin update there. We have also heard from Qantas. We've been crossing to our reporters at airports across the country. Qantas has updated to say that the flights are still operating just with some delays. They are experiencing some impacts to systems due to this software issue. So to find out more, let's head to Brisbane Airport where reporter Lawrence Jeffcoat is standing by. Lawrence, what's it like there?
Well, it's pretty busy here, and while it may have been an early knock-off for workers in Brisbane, it certainly wasn't an early boarding time for these passengers behind me. There's at least a crowd of 200 people behind me waiting to get on Jetstar flights. They're the main flights that have been affected at the moment. There's been 3 services that have been cancelled, one from here in Brisbane to Sydney, one from Brisbane to Townsville, and one from Brisbane to Mackay. We spoke to some different passengers on each of those flights a bit earlier, and one couple from the UK, they're here and they're just trying to get down to Sydney to continue their holiday. They've only got 3 days left. They're now not sure what they're going to be able to do. They don't have a hotel booked and they were hoping to get down to Sydney, so they're left in limbo. We've also spoken to a couple from Townsville who are trying to get back after that crippling Origin loss a bit earlier, and this is just another bad blow for them. And we also spoke to a gentleman who just arrived earlier from San Francisco. He had a 14-hour flight and he's trying to get to Mackay with his wife to go to his mother-in-law's funeral. They're now left in limbo too, and considering whether they get a rental car to drive 10 hours. Jetstar hasn't given any update yet as to whether this fix will be coming through soon, but they are giving regular updates to passengers here in the terminal through announcements. Yeah, you mentioned there that there's international travellers coming back home. We have been reporting today for viewers who have just joined us that multiple flights in America, CNN and ABC News America are reporting that Delta, United and American Airlines have all been ordered to halt takeoffs there. Just while we've still got you there, what are people saying to you? Just how chaotic does it feel, and is anyone exasperated yet at what it looks to be a chaotic situation? Well, there's a bit of a mix. I mean, you've got that gentleman, for example, who's trying to get to the funeral. He feels a bit more urgent. The people that have come from Origin, they just want to get home. There's some people that feel a bit anxious, but they're being updated and they feel like they're aware of what's going on. They just want an answer as to whether they can drop their bags off. A lot of people here have got pretty much, 4 or 5 suitcases with them, just trying to figure out whether they can get to the gate or even get into security to access more amenities and get into some more restaurants as well. OK, Lawrence Jeffcoat, we'll leave it there. Thank you for the update.
And just as an example of how many places across the country are being affected by this, we've heard about the big airlines, the big media companies, banks, banking apps on phones. In regional towns, it can cause major disruption when the petrol stations suddenly close, and that's what we've been hearing as well. So curiously, it's been affecting a lot of petrol stations. Our local reporter there, Felipe Perez, went for a quick walk to the local petrol station where he had a chat to Horsham Shell's Richard Kowalczyk, who told him he had 3 customers waiting to pay for petrol. Everything was going smoothly and it just closed down. I've called my manager and he's coming down to try and sort out petrol for these customers. Nothing like this has ever happened before. So just another example of how many people this is affecting. It's being affected with the payment system in particular. You're at one of the checkouts at your supermarket with a trolley full of goods and you go to pay, a tap with your phone or your card. It's not working. There are stories of people who are just leaving their groceries behind because there's no way of taking it legally out of the store. We are so reliant on all that now. Now let's head to Tassie. Reporter Josh Duggan joins us from Hobart. Josh, g'day. What's been happening there?
Well, the good news for Tasmanians is that emergency services are all still active according to the Tasmanian government. Thankfully, there's no problems with 000 as we've seen around the rest of the country. Airports and transport to and from Tasmania has been difficult. It looks like the airspace above Tasmania at the moment, according to flight radars, is pretty quiet. We're hearing from airports there are delays to flights, with Jetstar struggling to deal with the outage, and also Virgin, we've heard earlier in the program, have been potentially grounding all flights as well. The Spirit of Tasmania, we also understand, is going to be delayed tonight, but will be able to sail. There's been IT problems that have hit them as well, but they have been able to manually check off passengers on the boat, so anyone going to and from Geelong and Devonport will still be able to reach their destination by morning. Many of the major Australian retailers have been affected, such as Coles and Woolworths. We've heard Kmart's are closing down early, while there are some stores such as Woolworths that have remained open but have only been able to take cash here in the Hobart CBD. Some of the self-serve terminals have got the blue screen of death, while others have managed to be able to get through okay. Local media has also been affected. The 2 out of the 3 major Tasmanian bulletins have gone to air tonight. Here at the ABC, much like the rest of the ABC, we've had a fair amount of computers go down. Local councils are also, some of their services have been affected. We're aware of at least one in Greater Hobart that has had their computers all go off as well.
Okay, Josh Duggan there reporting on things in Tassie.
And interestingly, just some information on the business front. We've just received some information on Microsoft shares. This situation is having a material impact in pre-market trade, currently down 2.8%. Our business team will stay across that. But for now, our reporter Stephen Jedgetts joins us again from Parliament House in Canberra. And Stephen, what response have we had from the federal government?
Well, a little bit more information has just come to hand. We mentioned earlier today that the federal government was going to convene a meeting of a mechanism which it often uses for incidents like this. Now, we've got a bit more information. The government's told us that the meeting is now underway. Now, what we know at this stage is that it's going to involve a large number of representatives from a vast range of sectors which have been impacted. So the list that I've seen anyway includes major supermarket and retail chains. As we know, they've been impacted, both telcos and internet providers, banks and financial services providers, airlines, energy and water company representatives, as well as representatives from state and territory governments. So when you look at that list, it's a pretty long and voluminous one. You really do get a sense of the breadth of these impacts or potential impacts, and you do get the sense the government is now trying to sit down with them to try and work out exactly what's happened and what needs to happen next.
And Stephen, just while we've got you, keeping you there, can you just take a step back for us and talk about what the responses have been from certain departments back to 3-4 o'clock when this all started rolling out?
Yeah, it's worth remembering this is only a few hours old. It was around 3 p.m. that these reports started to flow through. That's when the ABC's screens clicked over to the blue screen of death, and it sounds like many other departments and sectors across Australia were hit at around that time. Now, the Cyber Security Coordinator has been at the heart of the government response. In the first instance, I think what they wanted to do was just make sure that there wasn't actually a cyber attack at play. Now, fairly quickly, around an hour or so after these first reports started to filter through, the government put out a message via social media saying that their information was, as best as they could tell, was that this wasn't a cyber attack. In other words, this was a cyber patch problem, a technical problem, rather than something malicious coming in from outside. I suspect that was the first thing the government wanted to make sure. But of course, the fact it isn't malicious doesn't mean that there aren't serious problems for a whole lot of people, as we've been hearing all afternoon. And of course, it also presents opportunities to malicious actors who might want to take advantage of the fact that many systems are currently very vulnerable with CrowdStrike potentially down. So the government doesn't just have to deal with the immediate impacts in terms of services stopping, banks closing, supermarkets being unable to serve. It's also presumably going to have to take a look at exactly what opportunities this crash opens up for malign actors, and that's going to be something that I imagine we'll be tracking pretty closely over the next couple of days.
Indeed. Stephen Jedgetts, thanks for the update.
Now, this is being described by experts as probably the biggest tech outage the world has seen. Our tech reporter is now covering one of the biggest stories she's ever likely to come across. Ange Lavoie-Pierre joins us. And yeah, just first of all, what's your reaction to the scale of this?
No one I'm speaking to has ever seen anything like it, which really gels with what you guys are saying there. It is the biggest thing that we've seen, and I mean, if you look at the two companies that seem to be at the heart of it, it's no wonder why. We're looking at Microsoft and we're looking at CrowdStrike. Now, Microsoft, of course, everyone knows, but in particular, we're looking at their cloud services here, and we've increasingly come to rely on those services. A large chunk of the world does. They're one of 3 major providers. And then you look at CrowdStrike. There's a cybersecurity company, and they are relied upon by a large chunk of the world as well. Now, what we're still trying to untangle is how related those two problems are, and what the causal relationship is between the two, if there is one. Perhaps it was just a fluke and they're sort of feeding back into each other now. That's something we're still, and everyone is still trying to work out.
So does it appear to have been an update that CrowdStrike was performing for Microsoft?
Look, Microsoft's issues seemed to predate the CrowdStrike, the CrowdStrike troubles. Microsoft started reporting issues 7 or 8 o'clock this morning.
East Australian time.
East Australia time.
Yeah.
And we've seen those issues play out around the world, as you've heard. But the CrowdStrike issues did seem to appear later. It led some in the industry to believe that the CrowdStrike issue was downstream from Microsoft. Whether or not that's the case, really, we can't say at all now, because we're starting to see some Microsoft services looking a little bit healthier. And, CrowdStrike, we are still seeing, obviously, issues all over the place. So, yeah.
And what some of our viewers might be struggling to reconcile and understand is how CrowdStrike is taking everything out, from self-checkout terminals to video cameras to smart devices to check-ins at airports. How is it doing that?
Well, it's just that everyone relies on this one service. We are learning in this moment exactly how vulnerable we are, because we are really relying on this handful of large companies. And, the cybersecurity space is more diversified than the, cloud services sector. But clearly, CrowdStrike has a large chunk of the market, and that is why we're seeing this major impact. It's the Falcon update. Look, there is something really important that I wanted to put across at this point, though. So I was speaking to an ethical hacker not long ago.
What's an ethical hacker?
They do exist.
Someone with good intentions.
Yeah. They're called white hat hackers, and they're often out there doing what they call in the industry red teaming, basically going around and trying to find vulnerabilities in systems ahead of time and trying to prevent events like this from happening. Right. But, they have essentially the same set of skills, but they're using them for good, if you will. And what he said to me just now was, look, I attack for a living. And if I were a different kind of hacker right now, what I would be seeing is an opportunity. And his advice was, if you are an individual or an enterprise that does rely on CrowdStrike, don't disable it now. Don't, because I think a lot of people are looking for a short-term fix, going, oh, well, and there's all sorts of advice getting around on social media about here's how to fix it, here's this workaround. His advice, at least, was this is a short-term pain, but if you take away your security, particularly if you're a large organisation, you're potentially opening yourself up to a much longer-term problem, because, there are people who will look at this moment and see nothing but open doors.
Yeah, that's really important advice in this situation, and that's, I guess, more primarily for business operators who have CrowdStrike as their security protection. Yeah. What about for regular people who might be coming across issues? What's your advice for them?
I think the advice is the same, and unfortunately, maybe we just sort of have to see this like a power outage. The lights go out, we get the candles. Maybe we just have to accept that, there are going to be services that are offline for a little while, and that's very difficult, and that'll have major impacts for people, major ramifications. But, trying to intervene, the message I'm seeing here is that trying to intervene, but if you're not an expert especially, can be a dangerous move.
So and hands off?
Well, the danger is certainly, I don't want to overstate the danger for individuals trying to sort of troubleshoot this at home. Yeah. It's a global problem. I don't know how much luck you'll have, but the advice for businesses, small, medium and large, was really, think of the long-term health of your business.
Well, let's put that to our next guest, Angela Vaupierre. Thank you for that update for us. And bring in Michael Hakila, the Chief Technology Officer at Gridware, joining us now from Sydney. Good evening, Michael. Thank you. Would you agree with that advice that we just heard from Angela Vaupierre, from one of her contacts, saying right now do not disable any of that, that system around you, if you've got CrowdStrike?
Yeah, that's right. So we received information from CrowdStrike that they've actually pushed out a subsequent update. So those machines that are able to get online and boot up successfully, they'll receive that update, and hopefully that'll be the end of their troubles. So
you could probably presume that some people might feel a little reticent or maybe a little bit fearful about putting another update in, given it what seems like at this stage the problem that we're in at the moment is because potentially of another update. What do you have to say to them about pressing the go button on this next update?
Yeah, look, the information that we've got is that this update will resolve those issues. We've tested it internally and it appears to be the case. Unfortunately, there are machines out there that are not able to boot up successfully, and those will require manual intervention. And so you've just tested that within the last hour or so? Yeah, that's right. So we started to receive news of this from about 3 p.m. this afternoon, and the bulk of the issues started to roll out worldwide about 3:30 this afternoon, and that's when we started to work on the problem.
So sorry, Joe.
So what should people look for to ensure that the update they're being provided is the legitimate one? Because we just heard from Angela Vaupierre that nefarious operators will be seeing this as an opportunity to get access people's computers. What should people be careful about in terms of activating that update? Yeah, absolutely. Look, CrowdStrike is aimed at businesses and government organisations. It's not really targeted at end users, and the bulk of end users won't be running CrowdStrike Falcon. However, it's important with any antivirus or EDR solution such as CrowdStrike that updates come from the official website and the actual tool itself. It's important not to read social media and click on links that you're unsure of or follow advice through those channels.
With respect to the timeline on the fix here, Michael, just how quickly can businesses resume as per usual?
Look, we've been seeing a lot of clients come back online fairly quickly. So within an hour of the problem becoming noticeable, there are going to be systems out there that will require someone to manually intervene, and we'll probably see this flow on throughout tonight and the weekend. So is that even looking pretty optimistic for huge organisations as well? Yeah, look, I think the bulk of those updates for those machines that are working, they'll be rolled out automatically. There's always going to be edge cases where, unfortunately, it's going to take some time to be back online. And Michael, we were just talking to our tech reporter Angela Vaupierre, and she was pointing out that their problems appeared to be arising with Microsoft before the CrowdStrike issues arose. I guess we're still to find out exactly how the timeline around that. But what do you make of that suggestion that the Microsoft issues started, they seem to have started around 8 o'clock this morning, Australian Eastern Time, and yet we had big issues arising here in Australia around 3 p.m? Yeah, look, as we know, this issue has only impacted Windows workstation or endpoints, where we don't have information yet as to what the actual cause was, whether the update itself was the only cause of this problem or where there were other factors involved. That information is still to come.
Okay, Michael Hakila, Chief Technology Officer at Gridware, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, let's take a look back at where we stand now. So we're continuing to bring you this rolling coverage of this major worldwide outage affecting computer systems around the world. It seemed to be the case more so in some continents than others. Banks, airlines, supermarkets, hospitals and media outlets, including us at the ABC, have been affected.
Some cybersecurity experts have told the ABC that this is the largest technology outage they'd ever seen. Major tech companies CrowdStrike and Microsoft have both suffered outages today. It's unknown if the outages are related, but both systems are used by enterprises globally.
Australia's National Emergency Mechanism Group is convening to respond to the issue. But Australia's cybersecurity coordinator says there is no information to suggest a cyber security incident or some kind of cyber attack.
Some health services have reported issues, but so far 000 services and core emergency services say they are able to work. The impacts are being felt world over, though, as we've been reporting. Flights have been grounded at many airports in the United States as well as Europe, and the full impacts of the outage are still being realised.
So several Queensland private hospitals are affected by the outage. Systems are down in some Uniting Care and Ramsay Healthcare hospitals. It includes the Wesley Hospital and St Andrew's Hospital in Brisbane. Reporter Victoria Pengilly joins us now from Brisbane. Victoria, what can you tell us?
G'day, Joe. Well, look, it's a pretty fluid situation here in Queensland. We know that at least several large private hospitals are being affected by this outage. As you mentioned, that includes St Andrew's, Wesley Hospital, and also Ramsay Healthcare, which owns about 20 hospitals across regional Queensland. Now, Ramsay Healthcare have issued us with a statement. They said that they're aware of the outage and they're assessing the impact at a local level across their hospitals and health services to understand whether or not it will impact their patient care. They say that at this stage they do not know how long the outage will last, and that's obviously the consensus across the country. We do not know how long this outage will last. Now, the outage is affecting their hospital system, so it essentially means that staff are going back to the old method of pen and paper for processing, admitting patients. They say that it's not affecting patient care at the moment, and staff I've spoken to seem to have it all under control at the private hospitals. They say it's not too chaotic at the moment. Things are taking a little bit longer to process, but for the meantime, they seem to have it under control. Now, good news, public hospitals in Queensland are not affected by this system. I imagine that that's because they're not using the same systems as some of these private hospitals. We also understand that emergency services are also not affected. 000 calls, paramedics, emergency services and police are not affected, and that's something that I really want to stress. If you need to call 000, your call will get through and you will be helped. Now, we also understand that some pharmacies in Brisbane have been forced to close their doors because their systems are down and they can't process medications and payments as well. I've also been speaking to a couple of businesses across the city. Most businesses seem to be unaffected, which is good news for punters. They're enjoying a Friday night drink, but we do know that Woolworths is also affected. Some of their systems are also down, but their payment systems seem to be going through. So look, a fluid system here, but for the moment, private hospitals seem to have it under control, Joe.
And Victoria, we've heard in other states that supermarkets and petrol stations, in particular in regional areas, have been affected. You may not have had time to kind of hear anything on that issue, and if you haven't, don't worry about it. And if not, maybe you can tell us about how it's affected the ABC, because we've heard major media organisations have been affected, particularly here in Australia. We haven't heard that much about the US in terms of media organisations yet. But yeah, I know, like here on the news channel, we're unable to play any stories, so you've got to put up with me and Kath just sitting here going on. But Victoria, how's it affected the ABC or anywhere else in Queensland that you've heard of?
Well, look, Joe, it's one of these issues, isn't it? The ABC, we rely on having images, but unfortunately at the moment we're quite picture poor in what we're able to do. Look, as any good newsroom like Brisbane, we immediately kicked into action, but, you know, our systems internally seem to be down. Now, that simply means that a lot of our computer systems aren't working, so it means that we can't write or send a lot of material or emails. It also means in terms of our camera equipment, whatever we record can't necessarily be sent back to our headquarters, which is why if you're watching us right now, we're going from reporter to reporter because we can't seem to be playing any other stories at the moment. But look, I haven't had much of a chance to speak to any of my regional counterparts about whether or not this is affecting regional towns and their petrol stations. But look, I do imagine that it would be having an impact there. Interestingly enough, a lot of people I spoke to around Brisbane this afternoon, a lot of punters just didn't seem to be aware of this outage. At the moment, it's not affecting FPOS systems or payment systems. It's quite unique to banking systems. It's also affecting some other companies, including AusPost, and other banks, including Commonwealth Bank, NAB, ANZ. It's also affecting Channel 9 as well. So I imagine that they're trying to cope with this unfolding situation too. At least we're not alone in this situation, Joe. But look, here at the ABC, this is what we do best. We do live rolling coverage best. It's where a lot of people turn to us when situations like this are happening. We've got large teams across the country that we really rely upon and who all kick into gear, and this is why we're here. But look, it is a bit of an interesting situation. So if you're not seeing the normal ABC coverage, even our screens, I can see that we don't have normal little banners and straps. I mean, it's all these little technical things, unfortunately. But look, it is all a work in process, and we're doing the best that we can, as both of you are.
Okay, Victoria Pengilly reporting there from Brisbane.
Bringing you now a statement from the Prime Minister that has been announced in just the last few moments. It reads from Anthony Albanese: I understand Australians are concerned about the outage that is unfolding globally and affecting a wide range of services. My government is working closely with the National Cyber Security Coordinator. There is no impact to critical infrastructure, government services or 000 services at this stage. The National Coordination Mechanism has been activated and is meeting now. So that was a statement by the Prime Minister in the last few moments.
And we're continually seeing stories pop up from around the world of different areas that have been affected, and we've been bringing you them over the past couple of hours. The latest one that's just come through in the past 3 minutes, another indication of just how widespread this is. Prague Airport is experiencing delays to departures due to what it says is an outage of the global check-in system used by a large number of airlines. The airport said on Twitter. London's Gatwick Airport said it was affected by global Microsoft issues in a post on X. Gatwick saying passengers may experience some delays while checking in and passing through security. Air France operations have also been disrupted, the airline said, adding that flights already en route were not affected.
Interestingly, we know a lot of people are heading to Paris right now with the Olympics just a week out. A lot of the athletes would be getting there, so there might be some disruptions to that.
That was going to be one of our great stories tonight. Actually, it was the first of the Australian athletes
in the village.
Arriving in the athletes' village.
Yeah.
We'll get you that in the next couple of days, or maybe we can do a phono with them. SAS Scandinavian Airlines booking engine is affected, making it impossible to book a ticket online.
Again, huge business ramifications here financially.
And ABC readers have reported delays and issues at several other airports, including Naples in Italy, Los Angeles in the United States, and Da Nang in Vietnam.
Well, let's keep across the airports now because we've got reporters stationed across the country. Michaela Ortolan is at Melbourne Airport and joins us now. Michaela, what's the situation there right now?
Well, at the moment it looks rather calm behind me, although there are a group of people now just walking through the doors. But a short time ago, security guided a group of people that were sort of gathering behind me, waiting to check their luggage in, and they took them to Terminal 2. I'm here at Terminal 1, where the Qantas check-in and baggage area is for their departures. They've taken them to another terminal to check in their baggage there, and then we were told they'll be brought back here, and hopefully a ticket can be issued from here, and they might be able to catch their flight. So it is really an unfolding beast. There's many moving parts. We know that the conveyor belts aren't operating. Some of the ticket machines aren't working as well, and a lot of people are having difficulties checking in. I've spoken to a number of passengers. Some have been waiting here for several hours. There was one passenger that I spoke to who was supposed to board a Jetstar flight. Her flight was cancelled, so she was popped onto a Qantas flight, but because of the system outage, the computers passengers weren't talking to each other, and none of their details were transferred across to Qantas. So they can't board that flight until those details are transferred across. When I spoke to her, she'd been waiting here for about 6 hours, and that wait continues for her. Some other issues that we're experiencing here at the airport is to do with the retail stores. A number of people don't have cash on them, so needing to purchase coffee or food while they wait these long delays, they're not able to do that. So there are delays. There are a few flights that have been cancelled, particularly with Jetstar. The airport is telling us that passengers should allow for additional travel time and just be very patient, which I think everyone is here at the moment. There's it's a sense of calm, really. It's, a chaotic situation, but people are just waiting around and are rather calm. So I guess we'll just wait and see. It will have flow-on effects, but hopefully they can all catch their flights soon.
And obviously those people who are intending to catch flights to get in touch with their airlines and keep across all of that, all the airport notices. Michaela Ortolin, we'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
Now, computing and informations expert from the University of Melbourne, Dr. Sulet Dreyfus, joins us now. Sulet, g'day once again. So, in terms of internet outages or tech outages, how does this rank?
Oh, I think this one ranks, pretty highly. It's a good 9 out of 10, I'd say. It's really had an enormous impact, and people are always, concerned about these things. But there's a lot of discussion about, is this going to be hundreds of millions of dollars of damage? There's really a big question mark about how much financial impact it will have.
And so, just before we go into that, is your understanding that this problem has stemmed from an issue with an update?
Yeah, so as we understand it, and I need to preface it by saying that not everything in this picture is clear yet, and there was an update, or we could call a part of an update from CrowdStrike, and that this update caused crashing problems. And then you've had this sort of secondary effect, which is where you have, say, a full disk encryption program. So you might have a program like BitLocker, for example, which would be the majority used one on Windows, that encrypts a hard drive of a computer. Where you've had that, you've got problems being able to push the fix-it software that CrowdStrike is releasing to all of the different machines, because if they're encrypted, you actually have to potentially, if you don't have some other retooling for them, unlock each of those machines with each of their keys in order to push the update to them. So this could be quite a long time to get fixed.
And Sulet, and as you said at the beginning, we don't know exactly what's happened yet. But what do you make of some suggestions where our tech reporter was just saying, it appears the problems for Microsoft may have actually started before the CrowdStrike update, because I think the suggestion is it started around 8 this morning, Australian Eastern Standard Time.
I haven't seen any evidence of that per se, but that doesn't mean, of course, it doesn't exist, because there's a bit of a chaotic environment right now and not full information. But you do need to run a program effectively, an antivirus, like a CrowdStrike at the highest level of the machine. And because, otherwise you can imagine that if you had some malicious software in there, it might be able to route around the, program that was intended to defend the machine. So that means it has enormous power over the machines to actually, if it has a problem, to make it difficult to actually get in to fix it if the machines are then, for example, encrypted. So I don't know whether or not Microsoft experienced this early on, but you could see a cascade effect certainly happening over the course of the day, and it has just exploded exponentially in terms of its impact. I mean, we started with relatively smaller regional airlines like Frontier Airline in the US. It's now United. It's now American Airlines. It's now whole airports in Europe. And so I think we're not quite done with it yet.
So, Sulet, which businesses is this going to be most problematic for, and which ones will find it the hardest and the longest to come back from?
So I think enterprises that unfortunately have done the right thing by trying to have encrypted boxes, they've done the right thing to the extent that one of the important cybersecurity measures you can do, even if you're a small business, even if you're not a large enterprise, is to make sure that things like external hard drives, USBs, but also your desktops, your laptops are encrypted so that if someone, say, comes in the middle of the night, breaks into your office and steals it, or if you leave your laptop on a bus or a train, no one else can actually get to that data. But as I say, this is a complicating factor potentially in trying to remedy the situation. Now, maybe it doesn't matter if you just have a couple of devices in your business, but if you have to fix 960 different machines, that could be a bit of a problem.
If this does end up being the result of a security update to Microsoft, how surprised are you that an update, which we've heard over and over and over in recent years, can often be the source of big issues, to a giant like Microsoft could have been the source of something like this?
Well, I don't think it's entirely clear that it's not the update is coming an update regarding CrowdStrike. So I think the problem probably originated with CrowdStrike, although again, yet to be clear on what that is. I mean, this is not a reason for individual people at home or people running small businesses to not update their systems. Yes, it does show us enormous vulnerability as a society, and I think it also potentially, shows us that we're very vulnerable in that we have a very small number of IT vendors that we're really dependent on. But it doesn't override the general security principle of wanting to run up-to-date software. What it does say is that before companies push out updates, they really need to run it in test environments and make sure there are no problems with them.
But that's
and not always, but often
that's
you find
like
that's what's happened.
Isn't that like you had one job and
of getting the coding right, if that's where it lands. I mean, see you later. It highlights the vulnerabilities here. But did you ever think that we, as not just in Australia but as globally, would be so vulnerable to what presumably might look like human error in an update?
Yeah, I mean, we have, in a sense, in the cybersecurity area, people are often running, red teaming tests, pretending to attack a system or an enterprise, a business, just to make sure that it's robust to attack. And that's because there's concern, if you're a big company, you might have important trade secrets. Maybe you're worried about nation state actors attacking you to get this information. Maybe you're just worried about competitors. But really, who needs to worry about those things when you could do it to yourself, right?
Indeed.
So that really illustrates that we're quite vulnerable. You don't have to wait for a nation state attack, I think it does say, look, sometimes what happens in organizations is the technical people are the really good, dedicated people. And they do want to be precise. They do want to run it. But sometimes they get pressure from their bosses. You have to do it faster. The business has to run faster. And then corners are cut. And even though the engineers don't want to cut them, and with that, you may send updates out that just brick thousands of machines.
I want to turn to an optimistic note, though. Apparently, CrowdStrike has, in recent hours, issued a potential fix, and we heard from another tech expert that they've actually installed that on their systems, and it has worked. What have you heard about that, and how promising is that in terms of companies being able to get on top of this reasonably quickly in the next couple of days?
So there is a note of optimism. You're quite right, and they have released this fix. And if you're downloading the update now, you're not going to get the bad update. You're going to get the good update. So that's important to know, to have some confidence in that. But you're going to have this lag problem. It's a bit like the lag problem of, when flights are shut down at airports, and then there's a long tail of flights that are trying to get out, and it's backlogged and all the rest of it. That's kind of what you'll see here. And you have this significant problem potentially where you have a bunch of machines that may have full disk encryption. So you may have a complicating factor there. But I think it's quite a good thing, obviously, that they've responded, and they've responded quite quickly. I do understand that there have been some quite grim conversations between CrowdStrike and some of its customers today. as you would expect. It's good that they've been able to respond to this pretty quickly. I'm sure they've had people working very hard on this.
Okay, Sula, it's really good to hear your expertise on this. I think we've got access to you for the next 15 minutes or so. So if you could hang around, that'd be great.
Happy to do so.
Okay, well, we're continuing to bring you rolling coverage of this major worldwide outage affecting computer systems around the world, including here in Australia. A national emergency meeting of authorities is now underway. The meeting involves energy and water authorities, state and territory governments, airlines and major corporations.
The outage has had widespread impacts affecting banks, airlines, supermarkets, hospitals and media outlets, including us here at the ABC. The Prime Minister has released a statement and says there is no impact to critical infrastructure, government services or 000 services at this stage.
But Anthony Albanese says he understands Australians are concerned about this outage, which has been described to us by some cybersecurity experts as the largest technology outage they've ever seen.
Major tech companies CrowdStrike and Microsoft have both suffered outages today. It's unknown if they're related, but both systems are used by enterprises globally.
The impacts are being felt world over. Flights have been grounded at many airports in the United States and across Europe. Australia's cybersecurity coordinator says there is no information to suggest a cybersecurity incident.
Now, one of the businesses affected have been service stations, including some really remote areas. Reporter Sophie Landau joins us now from Adelaide, not so remote. Sophie, what can you tell us about the servos there?
Oh, hey, Joe and Catherine. Well, behind me, the service station is practically empty. There's no one at the Bowser, which is something that I've not seen very often at this time of day, especially as people are heading home after their commutes to home from work. We know that a lot of people are not able to pay for fuel, so this is a pretty big issue. But what we do know is that buses and trains are not impacted here in SA. Same goes with right across Australia. Emergency services are not so impacted. We understand that 000 calls are going through, which is excellent. One thing to keep an eye on is that SA Health says that there have been minimal disruptions, but no patient systems have been impacted. SA Power Networks is also reporting that their systems are down. They're having some tech difficulties. Like many across Australia, people can report power outages online. And the big unis, they're also down as well, trying to reinstate their systems as soon as possible. Now, this tech issue is impacting the Adelaide airport. I do not envy those who are catching a flight tonight. Bag drops and information screens are down, and very importantly, check-ins for some airlines and terminal services are having some difficulties at the moment. So passengers in SA are being urged, get there early, allow some extra time to check in, and contact your airline if you want to get some information on your flights.
Okay, Sophie Landau reporting there from Adelaide, and I hope, Sophie, that you've got enough petrol in the car to get home.
To get home, yeah, exactly. That's what a lot of commuters would be thinking right now. Let's head up to Sydney now, where patrons at Star Casino have been told to leave due to the ongoing outage. Reporter Ethan Ricks is there. Ethan, what can you tell us about the situation there?
Yeah, good evening, Kath. Well, it wasn't too long ago that a number of patrons were kicked out of Star Casino here off the gaming floor, and they've now closed off the escalators which take people up onto the floor, and security guards are saying, hey, there's nothing we can do. The world has been affected by this as far as they know. But I do have an update. I've been refreshing Sydney Star Casino's website for a while now. I was only in there 10 minutes ago. But they do say now that they're pleased to advise the electronic gaming machines and electronic table gaming machines at the Star Sydney are back online. Whether they are actually back online right now, I'll check in a second when I can run back in there and see if everything's moving smoothly now. But obviously this is a huge business that has been affected by this global outage. You can just imagine the amount of machines in there and the amount of computers being used in those gaming rooms. And of course, gambling is probably not the biggest issue on people's minds right now, but it just shows you how far and wide this outage is being felt. Only across the road, the Coles, they're affected by this. People are going to and fro, just trying to ask what is going on here. A lot of people being turned away. I had a chat with someone who was waiting for a kebab. He was waiting for that kebab and he was going to eat it until the gaming room came back online. So it sounds like he might be able to get back on sooner rather than later. Also some other updates across New South Wales as well. We understand that New South Wales Health is not affected by this outage. They say they do not use the software of CrowdStrike, which we've heard a lot about today and tonight. For the first time, a lot of people like myself have learned what that is. New South Wales Health thankfully say they are not affected by this. We've gone through a number of businesses throughout tonight, plenty of Woolies and grocers. They're affected, but they've still got some registers that are working, so some people are still able to get out there right now. And it seems like, I don't know what it says when they are saying that people can come back onto the gaming floor and continue using some of those machines, but apparently it might be a good sign to come if people are back in such a big establishment like the Star Casino here in Sydney, Kath.
Okay, Ethan Ricks reporting there from Sydney. Now, just another example of how widespread the effects of this outage have been. Two hospitals in the northern German cities of Lübeck and Kiel have cancelled elective operations scheduled for Friday. Their operator said, citing this global outage. Patient care and emergency services are being maintained, though. But yeah, earlier we were speaking to an expert, cyber expert in Stockholm, and his suggestion was that as businesses started through the day, we were going to see more people affected through Europe, and that, more examples are popping up.
Indeed. As Ethan Ricks, our reporter there, was telling us, and earlier out of Adelaide, businesses are being impacted and the commercial impact will take some time to tell, but it is clear that businesses are needing to shut down. People are losing business as a result. At Star Casino there, patrons being told to leave. Computing and informations expert Dr. Sulette Dreyfus has been standing by for us. Sulette, we spoke about touching on the commercial aspects and the material impacts of this. Just how large do you think the cost of this could be?
I would be astonished if it was less than hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, this is a global impact, and it may be possible for some businesses, just average, small businesses, to roll back to what they had, from the backup yesterday and lose maybe a little bit of a mailing list or subscription. But that might be hard to do for a bank where you really need, your information up to date. You can't just rely on information you had yesterday. We've seen 7-Elevens shut down, sort of what people view as the last reliable outpost. We've seen, obviously, petrol stations shut down. I know of friends who've been going from petrol station to petrol station. They've all been shuttered. And of course, the really important question is, because vending machines are down, because you need point of sale, will people be able to get into the footy on Friday night, which is the burning question. But I think the bigger concerning issue is that we have an enormous dependency on a relatively few number of firms. And there's a choke point here. You have almost, it's not exactly a single point of failure, but it's only a few points of failure. And as a security design, that's always a worry. I mean, the internet was designed to not have a single point of failure. And yet here we are experiencing what it's like as a group of societies when you do have this single point of failure.
And just another example of a business that's been affected. Apparently Jetstar Japan's got an error with the system that manages the weight of baggage being loaded on the aircraft. No time when that system may be back online. So I just want to go back to something that you raised before when we were talking to you about the cause of this. And I think you said that it's not necessarily clear that this is a result of the CrowdStrike update with Microsoft. Can you just go into that in a bit more detail for us?
Well, I think it's not absolutely clear what's happened, but it looks as though, from the pieces of information that are available, possibly, this was an update from CrowdStrike and it has then impacted Microsoft. And there may be a set of design features to other security overlays. So you have updates sometimes to give features, but often to give security. And you may have these other security overlays. In a sense, they get tangled up with each other. And so if the CrowdStrike update then interferes with your ability, because, to if you will, fix a Windows machine or a set of them, because it has automated, or it has an encryption program on it, a full disk encryption program, you can't necessarily fix that at scale unless you've got a set of tools that have been set up specifically to do that. And maybe, organizations may not have anticipated, although I think they'll be thinking about it a lot on, Monday morning meetings in boardrooms around the country. And so with that, you've had this roll-on effect, but it seems to have probably originated with CrowdStrike's update.
It's interesting, Sulet, because we know that there is going to be a lot of finger pointing once the dust settles here to work out exactly where this problem has arisen from. Do you think that we'll get to the bottom of it? And how important is it that CrowdStrike and Microsoft work together on this?
It's really important. So there will be a temptation to do finger pointing, and the blame game is not going to benefit consumers, is not going to benefit businesses. So we have to push the blame game aside. That is not the right way to deal with engineering problems. The right way to deal with it is a no blame culture where you sit down and you analyze from first principles what has gone wrong here and how do we make sure this doesn't happen again. I mean, this wasn't, it would seem, an attack from a nation state or rogue criminal elements, but maybe it could have been. And if, maybe it will be actually a relatively inexpensive lesson, despite it being probably hundreds of millions of dollars of cost, because we'll see how dependent we've come and how interdependent these vendors are, and think about what we have to do to not have single points of failure or very few points of failure. And that will reduce the attack vectors in the future. From enemies, and so that could be a silver lining in this. But you only get to that point if you don't do a lot of finger pointing. If you genuinely roll up sleeves and go, we're going to figure out what happened so we can fix it properly so it doesn't happen again.
And so we're coming to the end of our shift on the coverage of this, and I think it's really important to tell people in these situations what is the right thing to do in trying to get, ensure they don't get deeper into trouble with this, because we heard from another cybersecurity expert that, from our tech reporter, that malicious operators will see this as an opportunity to hack people or get their details. So what is your advice to companies and just regular people out there? Because I guess CrowdStrike is more something that big companies would have installed, but there are regular people affected by this too.
Yeah, so it's important. Don't give up on computer security things like updates. Don't be freaked out. I mean, when Microsoft or Apple, they send you updates, if you've got your home machine or your small business machine, don't reject them because you're worried about this event. It's actually important to get them, and your risk will be greater if you don't. The second thing you need to do is be backing things up, and they need to be backed up on USBs, they need to be backed up on external drives, they need to be backed up in a way that they are offline so that they can't be affected and you can access them reliably. And that's also important for ransomware as well. And the third thing I'd say is be particularly wary in the coming days of phishing attacks, of fraudsters pretending to be your bank, pretending to be your superannuation organization, trying to contact you to get information. So be extra alert for that, and take your time. So if they're rushing you, quick, you got to do this, quick. If you don't do it, your access is going to go away. Just calmly go, no, I'm just going to pause. I'm going to look up the number of my, organization online, my bank online. I'm going to ring them. I'm not going to press a link on something that's been sent to me, and I'm going to check whether this is real.
Yeah, so
because
just
there definitely will be fraudsters out there.
Yeah, remaining very vigilant, making those phone calls yourself. But you just mentioned there, Sulet, to back things up offline. For people who might not be aware how to do that, do you mean, say, backing up to a hard drive?
Yes. So, I mean, you can go to your local, office goods provider and spend, $100 or something on an external drive, pick up something, 1 terabyte, 2 terabytes, and just plug it into your systems. That's true for small businesses as well. It's a very cheap investment. You need to do it regularly. But this is something that once you've backed it up and you do it regularly, you keep it offline. It's not permanently plugged into your machines. And that way, if something goes wrong, you've got this backup, and maybe you've lost a day or two of data, but you haven't lost all your data. And you could do that as well with a USB, but it is important in these cases because these are small devices to try and use full disk encryption on these devices. Just remember the password.
It's been great of you to join us. Thank you very much, Sulet Dreyfus. Great insight.
Thank you.
And just before we recap, Joe, some information out from a Woolworths spokesperson has said that stores across the country, all stores across the country except 6 are open and trading. In some cases, customers may find less registers available than normal. They're very grateful for customers' patience.
Yeah, and the optimistic aspect to this is that there appears to be a potential fix out there that is working, that we've heard from a cybersecurity expert, and so hopefully businesses will be able to get on top of this in the coming days. So just going back over the latest information on this major worldwide outage affecting computer systems around Australia and the globe, a national emergency meeting of authorities is now underway involving energy and water authorities, state and territory governments, airlines and major corporations.
The outage has had widespread impacts affecting banks, airlines, supermarkets, hospitals and media outlets, including us here at the ABC. The Prime Minister has released a statement and says there is no impact to critical infrastructure, government services or the OOO services at this stage.
We'll continue to bring updates to this major story throughout the night. Right now, Jeremy Fernandez continues our coverage on ABC News.
Tonight, a major IT outage shuts down computer systems worldwide. Good evening and welcome to this special edition of ABC News. I'm Jeremy Fernandez. Companies and government agencies worldwide are tonight in the grips of an unprecedented computer shutdown that's affecting banks, airports, telecommunications, supermarkets and small businesses. It began about 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and the impact is widespread. Flights are grounded, payment systems are down and some healthcare services affected. We here at the ABC are also operating at a reduced capacity along with other media organisations and we're unable to bring you our usual 7 p.m. news, so thank you for bearing with us as we take you around the country to our reporters standing by with live updates on events as they unfold. We'll get to the cause of this outage in just a moment, but let's begin with the massive disruption that's taking place tonight. Jamie McKinnell is standing by at Sydney Airport. Jamie, how are things looking there tonight?
Good evening, Jeremy. There have been huge queues to get through the security screening area here at the Sydney Domestic Airport for most of the afternoon. Now, while things might have come down a little bit here, the things that seem to be peaking in terms of the queues happened around 4:30 in the afternoon. There were points in the afternoon where this queue snagged all the way through this departure hall. Now, initially, the flight information screens, which we can usually see behind us at airports, were just showing a blue screen, and that was creating confusion for passengers who were arriving and trying to work out what was happening. About 5:15, those screens came back on and there was a small cheer from people queuing to get into the airport. Now, in a statement, Sydney Airport has said that a global technical outage is impacting some airline and terminal services. And it said while some flights are leaving and arriving, customers have been told to expect delays and allow for more time. About 45 minutes ago, there was an announcement here at Sydney Domestic Airport of a list of about 12 cancelled Jetstar flights for all different locations in Melbourne, Brisbane, the Gold Coast, Cairns and Adelaide. And staff here have been handing out bottles of water, although for the most part through the afternoon, the passengers have been very patient and just have been trying to work out what's been happening.
Jamie, what are people who are travelling tonight and tomorrow being told to do?
Well, the passengers who have been affected by those 12 cancelled flights have been told through the PA system here that they should head home and that they probably won't be travelling. They were also told that they can get a flight voucher refund from Jetstar. So in terms of what to do if you are flying tonight, probably the safest thing to do, Jeremy, will be to look for information from your specific airline, because it appears that some airlines are dealing with the issues differently to how others are.
Jamie McKinnell at Sydney Airport, thank you. Let's go to Parliament House in Canberra now, where Stephen Jedgetts has been following today's developments. Stephen, an emergency government group is meeting tonight. What are they saying about the cause of this crash?
Well, that's right, Jeremy. Now, the first thing that the government wants to stress is that this does not appear to be a cyber attack. And they also want to stress that, at least in the face of it, that critical infrastructure is still working fine. So, for example, the 000 line, as well as things like the energy grid, are holding up pretty well. So that's the good news. But, of course, the Prime Minister is aware that this is causing great anxiety. He's put out a statement saying that he understands many Australians are concerned about what's happening, and he's working with the National Cyber Security Coordinator to try and respond to the issue and to understand exactly what's caused it. And tonight, as you mentioned, there is a meeting of state and territory officials with federal officials, as well as representatives from a host of different industries which have been impacted by this outage, as they try and plot the best way forward.
Stephen, give us an understanding of just how widespread this is tonight.
Well, as you've been reporting, Jeremy, this is very widespread. It's airports and airlines, but also banks and telcos, major retail outlets, even casinos and universities, as well as, of course, media outlets, including the ABC. So this is very significant, and there is no indication of exactly when it will come back online. The government is hopeful that a fix might now be coming through from the provider in question, and that might allow things to be rebooted, but there's no guarantee of that. And then on top of that, of course, there are other anxieties. It's a reminder of just how networked Australia is, and therefore just how vulnerable it is to an attack or an outage like this. And then, of course, on top of that, there is a worry here in Canberra that cyber criminals and other malicious elements may look to take advantage of the chaos that we're seeing right now. So plenty for the government and industry to worry about as they try and grapple with this unprecedented problem.
Stephen Jedgetts reporting from Canberra. Thank you. 000 services nationwide tonight are appearing unaffected, but healthcare services more broadly are reporting problems. Victoria Pengilly is at St Andrews Hospital in Brisbane. Victoria, how widely are health systems there being affected?
Well, Jeremy, we know at least several large private hospitals across Queensland are being affected by this outage. We know St Andrews Hospital, Wesley Hospital and also Ramsay Healthcare, which own around 20 facilities across the state, are being affected. Now, Ramsay Healthcare, they've sent us a statement. They say that they're assessing the current situation and enacting any contingency plans and trying to ensure that it does not affect patient care. Now, look, this system is affecting computer systems which use Microsoft, and that means that staff are having to turn back to using pen and paper to process and admit patients. But at the moment, it's not affecting patient care at all. Now, look, staff I've spoken to say that they seem to have the situation under control. Things seem to be moving a little bit slower than usual, but it doesn't seem to be chaotic scenes here yet. For good news, we know that public hospitals in Queensland are not being affected by this outage at the moment. But look, it is a very fluid situation and things might change in hours to come.
One thing that's on a lot of people's minds is the state of 000 services around the country. Are they being affected?
Look, Jeremy, it's a really good question. We know that 000 calls emergency services are not being affected by this outage. So that includes ambulances, fire and rescue and police. And that's really important to stress. If you need to call 000, your call will get through and it will be answered. But look, this is a very dynamic situation and we'll keep you across the details as the evening comes on. Jeremy?
Victoria Pengilly reporting from Brisbane. Thank you. Well, alongside the chaos caused by this outage, there's still a great deal of confusion about what triggered it in the first place. To bring us up to speed on what we know so far, we're joined by national technology reporter Ange Lavoie-Pierre. Ange, where can we trace this outage back to?
That's the big question, isn't it? It is, from what I can tell, useful to think about this, for now at least, as two separate issues at two separate companies, because there's no evidence yet that they're linked at all. So it could just be the world's worst coincidence. And wouldn't that be something? So Microsoft's issues started first, reporting problems from 7 or 8 o'clock this morning, Australian Eastern Time. And CrowdStrike, of course, a cybersecurity company, their issues seem to begin much later, at around 2:30 in the afternoon, so five hours down the track. So naturally, a lot of people came to the conclusion initially, many in the cybersecurity world at least, that meant that the CrowdStrike issue was caused by Microsoft, that this all stemmed back to Microsoft. No one is certain of that anymore.
So we're hearing this name a bit, CrowdStrike. Just quickly tell us what that is.
Yeah, CrowdStrike is a cybersecurity company that has a significant share of the market globally. They provide antivirus services, but, you know, I guess broader threat analysis for large businesses as well. They're really shot through the entire digital ecosystem. And there's no doubt that they do feed back into each other, these companies, because of course Microsoft is so ubiquitous as well. And, you know, as evidence of that, when we saw Microsoft services, we did see Microsoft services rather dip again around the same time that the CrowdStrike issues started to turn up. So they are related. We just don't know how yet, and they could be, as I say, a big coincidence, and it may be days, weeks or months before we're able to untangle it.
We've had a number of hacks in recent times, people concerned about their online security. Is there any indication that this has been malicious?
No indication so far that this has been malicious, in much the same way as it's far too early to say which chicken caused the egg. It's too early to say whether or not this is a threat actor. And in fact, it seems that there's no indication of that at this stage.
It does sound like this is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, outage we've seen ever.
It's completely unprecedented historically. They've never seen anything on this scale. In fact, never seen anything even close. And really what this does is it highlights the risk of what they call in the industry market consolidation, which is a fancy way of saying too much of the global economy relying on too few tech companies, just a handful for critical services. And yeah, it will be a long recovery is what I'm hearing, because these things are painstaking to respond to.
We know that around the country right now, services have had to be shut down, payment systems are down, people have had to leave work early. Is there a timeline on a fix?
Look, I wouldn't say I wouldn't be prepared to hazard one after the day that we've had.
But there's no sign that one's imminent.
Well, look, the interesting thing is that CrowdStrike has rolled out what's called a workaround for this. So that's, you know, an early fix, and it's showing some promising signs already, but it is early days still. And if you look around at the live status reports of Microsoft's cloud services, Azure, around the world, they do seem to be business as usual. That said, the impacts within businesses could play out for much longer.
For a while. Angela Pierre, our national technology reporter, thank you so much. Well, this isn't just a national crisis here in Australia. The impact of this incident is being felt around the globe. Our correspondent Michelle Rimmer joins us now from London. Michelle, give us a sense of how crippling this has been in Europe and the UK.
Well, this part of the world has only just woken up to news of this global IT outage, so the full impact of these technical issues is still being realised. Here in the UK, trains, planes and some supermarket checkouts have been affected. Hospitals and GP surgeries are only treating the most urgent cases because they're unable to access medical records, so they're returning to pen and paper. The London Stock Exchange is unable to publish its regular news service, and one of the country's major broadcasters, Sky News, has been forced off air. Now, in Europe more broadly, there are airports in Spain and also in Germany that are reporting issues. They're also returning to manual services. Poland's main shipping container terminal has said that it is struggling, and the Paris Olympic Committee has released a statement saying that it's been affected. However, it has contingency plans in place, so everything is on track for the opening ceremony in just a week's time.
Michelle, what about the rest of the world? Are we seeing similar impacts elsewhere?
Yeah, again, it really is airports that we're seeing the most significant disruptions globally. We've had in Hong Kong emergency procedures activated at their international airport. Some airlines in Japan, in India and New Zealand have also said that they're experiencing delays and that they've returned to manual operations in an attempt to keep flights running. They're encouraging passengers to arrive hours in advance just to make sure that they can get through these manual procedures. While in the US, the country's main airline, American Airlines, it's issued a global ground stop notice, which means that no new flights are able to take off, and that's been replicated at carriers around the United States, including Delta. So we're seeing major chaos at some of these transport hubs globally.
Michelle Rimmer reporting from London. Thank you. We'll move on to other news for now and bring you up to date a bit later about the situation with this global computer outage. It's been a big news day. Donald Trump has officially accepted the Republican presidential nomination in front of a packed convention crowd in Wisconsin in the USA. In a marathon speech lasting 92 minutes, the former president called for unity and gave his first public account of last weekend's assassination attempt. North America correspondent Barbara Miller was at the event in Milwaukee.
To Houston. They were promised a different Trump, and for a while they got one.
I will tell you exactly what happened, and you'll never hear it from me a second time because it's actually too painful to tell.
Donald Trump sounding and looking softer, recounting the attempt on his life in blow-by-blow detail.
My hand was covered with blood, just absolutely blood all over the place.
It sounded at times like he was preaching.
I stand before you in this arena only by the grace of Almighty God.
And as his family looked on, Melania Trump making a rare appearance, he seemed reflectful.
I'm not supposed to be here tonight. Not supposed to be here.
There were some props. The helmet of the retired firefighter shot dead at the rally, and $1 million check donated to the victims' families. And there was talk of unifying.
I am running to be president for all of America, not half of America, because there is no victory in winning for half of America.
But then he pivoted, and more of the old Donald Trump emerged. Less name-calling, but still blaming.
If you took the 10 worst presidents in the history of the United States, think of it, the 10 worst, added them up, they will not have done the damage that Biden has done. Only going to use the term once. Biden. I'm not going to use the name anymore, just one time.
There was talk of mass deportations draining the swamp and a country on its knees that only he could save.
Just Donald Trump being himself and being authentic and being perfect for America.
A little more melancholy than usual, but that's expected, right?
He was not as aggressive as he usually was, and to be honest, I kind of missed it.
It was unbelievable. The three of us are together. It was unbelievable.
It started out differently, but much of this speech was classic Trump, where he veered off teleprompter, riffing and making hyperbolic claims. He largely refrained from naming them, but he said Democrats were weaponizing the justice system, cheated on elections, and had ruined the country. It's hard to see how that is a pitch for unity. Barbara Miller, ABC News, Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Let's now bring in our US election analyst, Casey Briggs. Casey, today has been a key milestone along Donald Trump's path to re-election.
Indeed, Jeremy, and all week the Republicans have been projecting confidence. And frankly, it's not really misplaced, because at this point I think we can say Donald Trump is the front-runner in the race for the White House. We could debate just how far ahead he is, but when you look at polling averages, Donald Trump is leading Joe Biden in all the key states. In Nevada, in Georgia, Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. If the Democrats are going to win in November, they need to win at least some of those states. Now, Donald Trump's lead is real, but it's not so big that in an ordinary year the Democrats wouldn't be able to catch up. But we all know this has been a far from ordinary year. And while the Republicans have been having their big week, at times it's been upstaged by the Democrats as more and more senior political figures in the party come forward, publicly voicing their concerns about the viability of Joe Biden's candidacy and his capacity to lead them to victory in November. Joe Biden himself is now reportedly considering his own political future as he self-isolates with COVID in Delaware. Jeremy, Joe Biden theoretically has a lock on the nomination. He won nearly all the delegates in primary contests in the first half of the year. He's supposed to be formally nominated at the party's convention in Chicago next month, but as we speak tonight, it's looking increasingly unclear if, in fact, it will be his name on the ballot.
Casey Briggs, thank you. So as Casey mentioned, while Donald Trump had a high point accepting the nomination for the candidate for the Republicans, Joe Biden's campaign is facing all kinds of questions as more and more Democrats come out questioning his candidacy. Carrington Clark is in Washington.
Former President Barack Obama has gone from giving Joe Biden a helping hand at a recent fundraiser to now reportedly steering him towards the exit, privately saying Biden has little chance of victory and needs to seriously consider his candidacy, according to the Washington Post. Losing Obama's support could prove politically fatal. The man he served under and has described as a brother.
It was 8.5 years ago that I chose Joe to be my vice president. There has not been a single moment since that time that I've doubted the wisdom of that decision.
Before retreating with COVID, Joe Biden recorded a radio interview.
I was smart enough to know, with age comes wisdom. I know the difference between the truth and lies. I know the difference between good and bad. I know the difference between what has to be done.
But the list of defectors keeps growing. The extremely influential former Speaker, the leading Democrat in the Senate, an A-list fundraiser, and now the former president. With Biden sick, his deputy and potential successor led campaigning.
You cannot claim you stand for unity if you are pushing an agenda that deprives whole groups of Americans of basic freedoms, opportunity, and dignity. So, friends, I say the contrast between Joe Biden and Donald Trump is like night and day.
Officially, the White House maintains the line, Biden has every expectation of continuing in this race. But as long-term allies desert him publicly and privately, there's a growing sense of momentum and inevitability that a different candidate will face Donald Trump at this year's election. Carrington Clark, ABC News, Washington.
Back home, the scandal engulfing the CFMEU moved to Queensland today, where the construction union has been banned from taking industrial action outside a major project. It follows allegations of intimidation at the site. Alex Brewster is following the story. Alex, what can you tell us?
The federal court made an order yesterday banning CFMEU members from coming within 15 metres of Cross River Rail, a large infrastructure project in the heart of Brisbane CBD. It follows allegations union members were threatening and intimidating workers. The union denied this, but the judge found enough evidence to issue an order which stops the CFMEU taking photos and recording workers entering and leaving the site. It came into effect at 9 this morning. The Queensland branch of the CFMEU hasn't been implicated in any of the alleged criminal activity in Victoria, and police say it's not investigating the union, but won't say if it's investigating individuals from the organisation. The Queensland government has cut ties with the CFMEU, announcing earlier this week it won't take donations or meet with the union. It's been a bruising week for the government, with the latest polling showing Labor's primary vote has plummeted to its lowest level in over a century, ahead of the October state election. Jeremy.
Thank you. He was the youngest Premier of New South Wales, praised for dragging Australia's leaders out of the pandemic. Now, after 13 years in Parliament, Dominic Perrottet is quitting politics. He's moving to the United States with his wife and 7 children to take up a job in the corporate world. Political reporter Alexander Lewis has the details.
Well, Mr Perrottet's departure has been expected on Macquarie Street for months now. It was known he was actively looking for work in the private sector. And today, the former Premier finally announced his resignation from the New South Wales Parliament, bringing an end to a 13-year political career. The ABC can confirm Mr Perrottet has landed a job in Washington, D.C. with the mining company BHP. He'll be taking on the role of Head of Corporate and External Affairs. He'll be moving to the States with his wife Helen and their 7 children. Mr Perrottet was first elected to Parliament in 2011 and has represented 3 seats in northwest Sydney. He's currently the member for Epping. He served as Finance Minister and in 2017 was appointed Treasurer by then Premier Gladys Berejiklian. Then in 2021, he became the state's youngest ever Premier at the age of 39 after the sudden resignation of Ms Berejiklian amid a corruption probe. Mr Perrottet took over during the twilight of COVID lockdowns and oversaw the easing of restrictions and the opening of borders. His colleague, Damien Tudhope, who's now the Shadow Treasurer, praised Mr Perrottet as a Premier who was prepared to do difficult things. He said Mr Perrottet dragged leaders from all states out of the pandemic. Mr Perrottet also received praise from the other side of politics. Premier Chris Minns said that Mr Perrottet leaves behind a huge legacy as a reforming Treasurer and a Premier who spearheaded many city-shaping projects. Mr Minns and Mr Perrottet have always been quite chummy. In Mr Perrottet's concession speech after losing the state election last year, he said that Mr Minns would make a fine Premier and encouraged voters to back him. As for what happens next, Mr Perrottet has signalled his intention to deliver a valedictory speech when Parliament resumes next month. He says he'll formally resign on the 11th of August. This means that the Liberal Party in New South Wales will now face two by-elections, one in Mr Perrottet's seat of Epping and also one in Hornsby after the resignation last month of another former Treasurer, Matt Keane, who has since been appointed by federal Labor as the chair of the Climate Change Authority.
Alex Lewis reporting from Sydney. The lawyer for the former Jetstar pilot Greg Lynn says his client will appeal against his murder conviction. Lynn was last month found guilty of murdering camper Carol Clay, but not guilty of murdering her companion Russell Hill in Victoria's High Country in 2020. Sasha Payne joins us now from Melbourne. Sasha, what happened in court today?
Well, this morning in the Victorian Supreme Court, Dermot Dan, who is Lynn's barrister, told the court that his client would be appealing the guilty verdict. He says his client maintains his innocence and says he's never killed a person at any time or in any place, anywhere, ever. During the trial, Lynn admitted to destroying evidence, including burning the campsite and the dead campers' bodies, but he says they died accidentally. His barrister says the appeal would be on the grounds the prosecution arguments during the trial were unfair and that they broke the rules. He said the defence was considering whether it should make an extraordinary application to the court for Lynn's sentence to be delayed during the appeal period, which would be highly unusual. He said this was due to concerns about the verdict, his client's safety and the way the trial was run. He also highlighted concerns about media reporting after the verdict. He says this included unsubstantiated allegations, gossip, links to other crimes and deaths, and it had poisoned the well of justice to the point where a fair retrial could not be held in the near future. Lynn will return to the Victorian Supreme Court for another pre-sentence hearing on September 12.
Sasha Payne reporting from Melbourne. A number of refugees being held on Nauru has increased sixfold in 6 months, raising questions about the future of the detention centre and the stability of Australia's border protection policies. Despite Nauru being empty at one stage last year, there are now almost 100 people being held on the Pacific island.
Inside the Nauru detention centre, detainee Mohammed Anjan is able to make calls from an old mobile phone.
They're treating us like animals. We are not criminal. We are not like the animals.
The Pakistani asylum seeker was one of 39 men who shocked authorities in February when their boat landed at Beagle Bay in remote Western Australia. Mohammed Anjan says he didn't know he'd be sent to Nauru, and now he doesn't know when he can leave.
When we asked them how long we will stay here, how long we will go outside, what is our future, no one is saying this.
The centre was empty for about 3 months last year, with all detainees processed and resettled in other countries. But advocates say there are now 96 people being held on the Pacific island, up from 15 in February.
To see nearly 100 people there now is absolutely devastating.
Refugee Council of Australia figures show 273 people arrived by boat between 2022 and 2023, compared with 174 in the previous 5 years. A spokesman for the Home Affairs Minister, Claire O'Neill, says funding for Operation Sovereign Borders has never been higher. But her department's figures show maritime patrol hours are down due to workforce shortages and vessel maintenance.
And what that means is that people smuggling vessels are not just attempting to come here, they're breaking through and making it all the way to the Australian mainland.
A 2022 deal to resettle Nauru detainees in New Zealand is due to expire in a year's time. The New Zealand government is yet to commit to extending it, but it's the key to ensuring that those detained now aren't held indefinitely.
It should be completely conceivable that the Australian government can deal with these people within a timeline of 90 days.
Bethlehem Tibebu was one of Nauru's first detainees 11 years ago when offshore processing began.
The impact that I got from Nauru offshore detention was mentally and physically sickness, still that I cannot even recover.
With both major parties committed to offshore detention, this centre will need to remain open for the foreseeable future. Isabel Rowe, ABC News, Canberra.
Let's return now to our top story, the major IT outage causing chaos here in Australia and around the globe. Michaela Ortolin is at Melbourne Airport. Michaela, can you bring us up to date on where things are at right now?
Well, computer systems across the world have gone down with a widespread outage affecting many Microsoft users. Computer security company CrowdStrike has been linked to the outage, which is affecting banks, supermarkets, airports and businesses. Retail payment systems are also down and media outlets, including the ABC, have also been affected. We've also heard that our healthcare services in Melbourne and Brisbane are being impacted, but thankfully 000 calls are still able to be made. Now, this all unfolded at around 3 o'clock Australian Eastern Standard Time, not just here in Australia though, but across the world, where we heard flights in Europe and in the US were grounded. Now, at about 6 o'clock tonight, a national meeting was held, hosted by the federal government, energy and water authorities, airlines, state representatives, telecommunication providers were among the people that were invited to attend that meeting. We have heard that Australia's cyber security coordinator said there is nothing to suggest that this is a cyber attack, but experts are saying it's the largest technology outage that they've seen, and the impacts of this could last a number of days.
Michaela, how are things looking at Melbourne Airport tonight as passengers continue to wait for information?
We have heard from a number of passengers who were waiting here at Melbourne Airport for several hours. The conveyor belts were down. Passengers weren't able to get their tickets printed from the machines. Even simple things like purchasing a coffee or buying dinner while you're waiting here for several hours for your flights, they weren't able to do that because EFTPOS machines were down. The crowd behind me has cleared out. We have heard that a number of people have been able to now catch their flights, but there have been lengthy delays, and the airport is telling us that anyone planning to come to catch a flight should prepare for those delays. They should allow for extra travel time and brace for those delays.
Michaela Ortolin reporting from Melbourne Airport. Thank you. So let's just recap for you the breaking news tonight on a global computer outage affecting a range of services globally. Banks, healthcare providers, retailers and telecommunications providers are among those who are affected, along with media outlets, including the ABC. Airports across Australia and around the world, from Vietnam to France, Italy and the rest of Europe, along with the United States, are reporting disruptions and delays. At this stage, Australian authorities believe the outage is linked to the cybersecurity firm CrowdStrike and to Microsoft. They also say it's not believed this is the result of a cyber attack. It's still unclear on when a fix might come. The ABC News team will have updates for you through the night at news.abc.net.au and also on ABC TV, ABC iView and the ABC Listen app. Good night.
Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Joe O'Brien. We're continuing our rolling coverage of this major tech outage that's been affecting companies globally.
Yeah, and I'm Catherine Robinson. Welcome to listeners joining us on ABC News Radio as well. And if you're just joining us, let's bring you up to date with the latest. Microsoft says it anticipates a resolution is forthcoming to the issue causing a major worldwide outage affecting computer systems around the world. The company says the issue affecting Windows devices is due to an update from a third-party software platform.
Major tech companies CrowdStrike and Microsoft have both suffered outages today. It's unknown if the outages are related or if they arose independently, but both systems are used by enterprises globally, and it's been interesting to see this Microsoft statement released just in the last hour or so, and we'll dig into that in a bit more detail soon.
And as we know, this unprecedented outage is affecting banks, airlines, supermarkets, hospitals and media outlets, including us at the ABC. And a national emergency meeting of authorities got underway at around 6 o'clock Australian Eastern Standard Time.
So this meeting involves energy and water authorities, state and territory governments, airlines and major corporations. The Prime Minister says there's no impact to critical infrastructure, government services or 000 services at this stage.
Some cybersecurity experts have told the ABC that this is the largest technology outage they'd ever seen. And the impacts are being felt the world over. Flights have been grounded at many airports in the United States and Europe.
Australia's cyber security coordinator says there's no information to suggest a cyber security incident. And Jamison O'Reilly is an expert in cybersecurity and the founder of Devon, an information security company, and he joins us now in the studio. Jamison, welcome. So first of all, take us to this Microsoft statement that's just been released, and what does that shed light on what's exactly happened here?
Yeah, so what it sheds light on is that the fact that, yes, they've announced it's a third-party software provider. That's in line with CrowdStrike statements. They are a third-party software solutions provider. And so it does look like to me that these are connected. We know that CrowdStrike does have a very large market cap throughout the world, including potentially Microsoft. If they are using CrowdStrike software to protect their own services, that may be why we're seeing them both closely related.
Yeah, because there was a bit of uncertainty. I guess there still is. We don't know
Correct.
exactly what's happened as to whether this was two separate incidents or something related. And so it's pointing to that it was actually related.
I believe so, yeah.
Jamie, you've been in the industry of information security for over 12 years now. Did you ever expect something like this, with the impact that it's having, not just here in Australia but around the world, would happen?
Look, people for a long time have been speaking about major outages like this. I think it's just a perfect storm where you've got a provider that has a very large market capitalization, and there are a lot of companies using this software, whereas if it was more diversified, you wouldn't see such a large outage.
How can something like this go wrong for such a huge company which would be at the forefront of trying to ensure that this just never happens?
Yeah, you know, a lot of people are asking that question right now, and I think the only people that can really answer that are CrowdStrike and potentially Microsoft if they're not connected. But I do think one thing that people need to be very careful here about is that in times like this, everybody's rushing around trying to fix things. Businesses want operations to get back. They want their customers to restore services. And in that time, people could be potentially removing security software because that's what could be causing the problem. But by doing so, they're leaving themselves open to further attack.
So advice, I would imagine, to say to your customers would be not to remove that at this stage. What other advice would you be giving to small to medium to large businesses?
Yeah, I think the advice is just we really need to follow the vendors here, the technology partners. If you do have a cybersecurity partner that you work with, definitely liaise with them, because the way the ecosystem works, the companies like CrowdStrike will have direct contacts into other security providers.
Is it the case that something as simple and basic as a line of code could have been the source of this?
Yeah, and this is true. The nature of software development and system bugs and software bugs are like that. You could have something, but typically companies of this size have quality controls in place to make sure that if there is a crash, it happens on a non-customer environment first.
So I guess we'll have to wait and see if it was in the coding, or I'm sure there are many iterations of other things that could have gone wrong. Jamison O'Reilly, founder of Devon, thank you very much for your time. If you can stay there for now, because we're going to cross to Canberra, where political reporter Nicole Hegarty joins us from Parliament House. Hi there, Nicole. What can you tell us about the government's response?
Hi, Kath. Well, so far we have heard confirmation that that emergency meeting called earlier today of government agencies as well as representatives from all of these businesses and services that have been caught up in this global breach or outage, rather, has started. It got underway at 6 o'clock. We also have had two different statements, one from the Prime Minister where he says that he understands the concern that this massive breach, this unprecedented outage has caused. We also heard from the government as well as the Prime Minister really reiterating that this has not extended, the impact of this has not extended onto critical infrastructure, and that includes 000 calls, government services, that those have not been impacted by this. We also heard that from Australia's National Cybersecurity Coordinator. Now, that's a relatively new role that's set up to really spearhead the response and coordinate the response across federal, state and territory levels. Michelle McGuinness, issued a statement earlier today saying that they were aware of this unfolding incident and looking into it, as well as how to best respond to it. The government really highlighting that this does seem to be a third-party system issue, and there are no indications that this is any sort of cyber breach or cyber incident.
OK, Nicole Hegarty there in Canberra. Let's go now to Sydney, and patrons at Star Casino have been told to leave due to the ongoing outage. Reporter Ethan Ricks is there. Ethan, what can you tell us?
Yeah, certainly not the most pressing issue at the moment for most people across the country, but it just shows you how widespread this outage is, and such a big company like Star Casino being affected by this as well. We understand all patrons were kicked off the gaming floor earlier this afternoon after their systems went down, and they're not letting anyone come back on for the moment. We did see an update on their website that they say their systems are coming back online and they're going to start letting people back in sooner rather than later, which is probably a good sign of things to come. We also a bit of an update of what's happening across New South Wales in terms of the impact of this outage. We saw at Sydney's domestic airport, long queues started to build as a lot of those airlines struggled to check people in quickly, and a lot of them had to resort to some manual processes. But we also understand there that a lot of that issues have been fixed. We got a statement from Virgin Australia that says a lot of their systems are now running stable, but that comes after dozens of flights had to be cancelled, even more had to be delayed. We understand that's now starting to move a lot quicker, and some of their systems are starting to come back online. Another good sign of things to potentially come. Now, we got a update from the New South Wales government just a short time ago about the other systems that have been affected by this outage. They say some transport lines were affected, including in Newcastle, the Hunter line and the Southern Highlands line, but they say those issues are now resolved and they're back up and running as smoothly as possible. They say some services, in terms of taking payments at Services New South Wales, have been affected. And they say emergency dispatch services have also been affected, but exactly what that looks like is still yet to be officially known. But they do say that emergency contacts and 000, they remain online. So if you do need assistance, make sure you reach out and call 000 as soon as you need it. But this impact is still being felt across the country, especially here in New South Wales. But some good signs of things coming back online. We'll just have to wait and see if that's all going to be resolved soon.
The Star in Sydney, thank you. Bringing back in cybersecurity expert, founder of Divan, Jamison O'Reilly. Jamison, we're hearing how this is it's affecting so many places so broadly, but say some private hospitals are being affected, but some of the public hospitals are not. How is it patchy like that yet so wide?
Yeah, so typically in some environments they have what we call staged updates, and they put controls in place exactly for this reason. So there are ways in software to prevent updates coming to your machine until they've been well and tested in the public for a number of days. Typically this is 3 to 5 days. Because of this exact reason, even some of my own customers have avoided this issue because they haven't been connected to these updates. And I've noticed there's been some chatter on social media from some significant people within CrowdStrike who have mentioned that they're doing their best to try and see which customers haven't received the updates yet, and then trying to prevent it even occurring with their devices.
And what's your advice to people in terms of ensuring that they do get the right fix when that fix comes through, and we've heard that it's available now and it is working, that they're 100% that they're clicking on the right thing and not inviting some malicious operator in?
That's a really good point, and I think it's important to increase vigilance here because attackers are watching what's going on as well. And whenever we have these, mass hysteric moments, attackers will send in phishing emails, and they're preying on people's confusion and their desperation. So I think be very careful about any emails you're getting, any communications around this, because attackers will be looking to leverage it.
And we know that one of the big infrastructure points that have really been impacted, not just here in Australia but around the world, is airports. And let's see if we can now go to Darwin, where Thomas Morgan is at the airport there for us. Thomas, can you hear us?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. What's happening there? You've moved from the main street to the airport. Is it busy and chaotic, or are things running smoothly?
Well, it was a bit busier about an hour ago. That's because there was a Jetstar flight to Adelaide that was expected to depart about an hour ago, and instead many passengers on that flight were waiting down here in the departures area, the check-in area, with very little information about what was going to happen. Now, in just the last few minutes, there's been a voiceover that's come out here at the airport informing them that their Jetstar flight to Adelaide has been cancelled. Other airlines, potentially their flights are departing, but for some passengers here at Darwin Airport, they're not quite yet sure what they're going to do tonight, whether they have to find a hotel themselves or whether Jetstar will be putting them up somewhere. So some disruption from the nation's largest low-budget carrier tonight. Of course, the disruption here in Darwin has been more widespread than just the airport, although it has certainly been the most, noticeable example. We did see this afternoon the supermarkets in Darwin CBD impacted as well. We had one major supermarket have to close its doors because its self-service checkouts weren't working, and here the baggage drop and also the self-serve check-in aren't working. So this automation that has become very popular with major companies across Australia has really been impacted by this major cyber incident, which of course is affecting the globe and many airlines, not just here in Australia, but in Europe and the United States, as we just heard as well.
Automation that we've all become very happy to rely on. Thomas Morgan, thank you.
And things didn't look too bad there at Darwin Airport, but I can tell you at Sydney Airport, I've seen some images from there just in the last half hour or so. It's getting really packed. We had our reporter there a little early, Jamie McKinnell. It didn't seem too bad. It was pretty busy, but looks like, they're having
the backlog is starting, isn't it?
some big challenges there now. And we're still getting these examples of operations and companies that are being affected by this. Now, Central Queensland's coal train network has been shut down due to signal failures and system outages, and a Horizon spokesperson said a number of its information technology systems were unavailable or had been taken offline as a result of this global outage. As a result, this has impacted some of Horizon's train services and rail infrastructure operations, including the Central Queensland coal network. So just one other example of how many businesses this is affecting, from airports and hospitals in Germany and UK to airlines in the US and media organisations and petrol stations in outback Australia. Let's bring in now Australia's foremost cyber security leader, Alastair McGibbon, who joins us from London. Alastair McGibbon, welcome. Are you pretty surprised that this has happened?
Disappointed that it's happened, of course. No surprise really that we end up with these types of impacts, given the sort of install base of CrowdStrike. So when something goes wrong, it goes wrong in a big way, as you're seeing.
Alastair, you were the Special Advisor to the Prime Minister on cyber security. We have heard from Anthony Albanese today saying that, in the last few hours actually, his government is working with the National Cyber Security Coordinator to understand and respond to the issue. If you were still in that role, how would you be advising him, and what sort of conversations and decisions would be being made by government at this point in time?
Well, I'm sure the Prime Minister is well advised by the current folks. Michelle McGuinness is an excellent cyber security coordinator, so she and the team at Home Affairs more broadly will be briefing really well. To me, this is all about communications. This is about just reassuring to the public that this doesn't appear to be a malicious act. Now, if you're stuck at a supermarket checkout, or you can't get a plane, or in my case, not being able to fly out of London perhaps tonight, sure, it's disappointing, but it's better to know that it doesn't seem like a malicious act because that can give more calm to the public. This is just a reflection of how connected we are now in our societies, not just in Australia, but around the world. So when a very important piece of software has a problem, we're seeing the really massive impact of it. But it would be all about communication. It would be about giving calm as much as possible to the public. And of course, in slower time, it would be to try to understand how you could build systems to reduce the likelihood of this happening again.
And speaking of that, you say it's an example of how connected we are, but is it also an example of how over-reliant we are on some big companies?
Well, of course, this highlights that some companies do better than others. We've only got a couple of really big cloud providers, for example, and if one of them had a problem, the entire world would stop. This is a very successful cybersecurity company, and by the nature of the way cybersecurity software operates, by its very nature, it is amongst the first thing that a computer sees when it starts up, which means you've got to get into it pretty deeply to reboot this computer. So there's a fix for this. That's something that your viewers should understand. What you now need to do is get to each of those computers and pretty much reboot them. You can't tell it to do it remotely, because when you do it remotely, the security software stops it happening. So it's actually weirdly, and this might sound, I'm not trying to trivialise it, but it's not a big technical issue. It's just having big impact. It does highlight, of course, that there are some successful companies out there, and when things go wrong in those successful companies, we're impacted.
Alistair, there has just been some comments out by the Home Affairs Minister, Claire O'Neil, who attended that National Coordination Mechanism meeting, and comments attributed to her as CrowdStrike attended the meeting, and we can confirm that there is no evidence that this is a cybersecurity incident. So that goes to your allaying fears of people thinking it might have been otherwise. She goes on to say it's a technical issue caused by a CrowdStrike update to its customers. Joe, we might go on to finish the rest of it and then get some response from Alistair.
And so they've issued a fix for this. The Minister goes on to say CrowdStrike's issued a fix for this, as we've heard, as allowing affected companies and organisations to reboot their systems without the problem. The company has informed us that most issues should be resolved through the fix they've provided, but given the size and nature of this incident, it may take some time to resolve. Governments are closely engaged at all levels, focused on bringing together the affected parties and ensuring government entities institute the fix as quickly as possible.
She goes on to say that the government will issue updates as required. So hearing that, Alistair, plus what we heard, a brief statement from Windows earlier saying we are aware of an issue affecting Windows devices due to an update from a third-party software platform. Are we getting a better picture as to what has happened here?
Yes, very early on, people worked out that this was a CrowdStrike update to its software that was pushed, would have been pushed at night US time, which is why Australia is more impacted. This was done obviously when less computers are turned on in America, but given the nature of how these things go, it means that things are on in Australia. So we worked out pretty quickly what the problem was, and there is indeed a patch now. There is a fix for this, is a better way of describing it. The trouble is getting the fix onto the computers. Probably means IT teams are going to have to literally touch every keyboard unless they can give good instructions that dumb users can use to reboot their computers. So there is a fix. It doesn't appear to be malicious. You're right. My understanding is CrowdStrike participated in that emergency meeting. So all things are being done what the public needs to do, of course, now is to reduce the stress on the system. That means if you don't have to travel, don't travel. If you don't have to go to the supermarket to be disappointed that the point of sale device isn't working, don't go to the supermarket. We're just going to have to be sensible, because there's nothing else we can do until these systems are brought back online.
So as unfortunate as this is it, as some cybersecurity experts we've been talking to, actually a good trial run for learning how to handle something like this?
Well, of course, there are learnings for this. CrowdStrike and every other major software provider will recheck the processes that they have before they push any software out again. This is not the first time that's happened, right? You'll recall a major telco had a problem by pushing out essentially a piece of software that impacted their systems not so long ago. So it's all about processes. In this case, it's a piece of software pushed out by the provider to end computers. That means the provider themselves and all other providers of software, the big global players, will redo all of their processes to reduce the likelihood of things happening again. I use the word reduce for a good reason, because I've spent my whole career proving people will fail. The whole point is we want them to fail less often. And then for the community itself, for us, whether it's the media, whether it's the government, how do we communicate better during one of these incidents to make sure there is calm, to make sure that we give the best advice possible to people to how to fix their computer systems, because, for example, you can't email out a solution to a company who doesn't have working computers. So how do you communicate that message to them? Simple things like that. And then, of course, yes, the government mechanisms, the ones designed to protect us and to communicate with us. This is just another important opportunity for them to learn how to do it better.
So given what we're seeing so far, Alistair, in the response to this, I mean, we're only, about 4 or 5 hours into it really hitting hard and hitting extensively across the country and rippling around the world. We've heard from Windows, we've heard from the government. How would you assess it's being handled from the response point of view?
Well, I've spoken to people that were in that meeting, both from industry and government. Those mechanisms are better every time that we do them. They had a lot of the affected big businesses, because the point is, this is a very reputable cybersecurity company in CrowdStrike, and it's a CrowdStrike problem, just to reassure people. It's not a Microsoft problem. It is a CrowdStrike problem that then impacts Microsoft. They're a reputable company, and the trouble is they're therefore very successful, and because they're successful, it impacts more computers. Look, the system, as best as it can, is working. The government is communicating. Those affected major companies are working, and government agencies too can be affected by this, are working together to share as many resources as possible and solutions with each other. And again, I just want to highlight, this doesn't appear to be a malicious act. If it was a malicious act, it'd be way worse, because we wouldn't understand the motive of the offender. They would cause a lot more harm than just the blue screen that you have seen around ABC studios today, and it would be way worse for all of us. So again, sometimes you wouldn't be calling this a near miss. It's certainly a hit, but it's a hit that wasn't malicious, and as a consequence we'll learn more from it, and there'll be plenty of raking over the coals by government agencies and corporates all around the world.
And are you out of Gatwick or Heathrow tonight, and have you received any messages on whether that flight's going to go or not?
Well, I'm told so far that my flight out of Heathrow is happening, but I'll keep a careful eye with my airline and whether that's occurring. So again, I knew about this because my Australian colleagues had contacted me here in the UK. They woke up to this issue happening around them. So it's not only Australia, as we know. This is a global issue. I think Australia has been impacted probably in an outsized way because it was daylight and because therefore computers were on and it's peak times for us. Whereas here, hopefully they've had enough learnings now from other parts of the world to minimise impact, and I can get back to Australia.
Indeed. Okay, Alistair McGibbon, thanks so much for talking to us.
Cheers, thank you.
Well, let's get more now on the disruptions at airports. Reporter Michaela Ortolan is at Melbourne Airport. Michaela, you've been there for a while over the last few hours. How's the situation changed?
Well, it's very quiet here at the moment. You wouldn't have thought that anything like what we've seen before would be going on, looking at the scene behind me. But we have spoken to airline staff and they say that generally this time of the night is rather quiet. So they're just currently working through a backlog of systems. I've been told that the conveyor belts are back up and running, so people are able to check their luggage in here at Qantas. I'm not entirely sure about the ticketing system, the self-serve ones, but people are able to get tickets to board flights. Now, there are still significant delays, and those delays are expected for some hours and potentially even into tomorrow, as well as the airline works through the backlog that they've experienced because of this outage. Now, earlier today we did speak to a number of customers who had been waiting here for several hours, some up to 7 hours almost. They were supposed to board a Jetstar flight which had been cancelled. They were then put onto a Qantas flight, but because of the outage their information couldn't be transferred across to Qantas, and therefore they weren't able to board that flight. Not too long ago though, there were cheers all around, and that group of women going for a girls' trip were able to board a flight to Perth, and they're on their way now, ready to enjoy their holiday. So I guess there are some good news coming out of this with people able to catch their flights. It's just a matter of being patient and waiting patiently through those delays, which we might see, like I said, for a couple of days potentially to come.
Michaela Ortolan, thank you.
Yay, the girls' trip's on.
It's the first bit of good news we can probably really bring you tonight so far.
Several Queensland private hospitals are affected by the outage. Systems are down in some Uniting Care and Ramsay Healthcare hospitals. It includes the Wesley Hospital and St Andrews Hospital in Brisbane. Reporter Victoria Pengilly is there and joins us now. Victoria, g'day once again. What's happening?
G'day, Joe. Well, look, it's been a pretty interesting day here in Queensland. We know that several large hospitals, private hospitals across Queensland, are currently being affected by this outage, including St Andrews Hospital, Wesley Hospital, and also Ramsay Healthcare, which own around 20 hospitals across Queensland. Now, Ramsay Healthcare, they've issued us with a statement, and they say that they're assessing the impacts at a local level across their hospitals and health services and trying to work out whether or not this impacts their patients. Now, Joe, our understanding is that the outage is affecting the computer system within the hospital. So that means the staff are having to revert to processing and admitting patients the old-fashioned way with pen and paper, which is making things a little bit more challenging for staff, but we're being assured that it's not affecting patient care. Now, some hospital staff I spoke to earlier said that they had things largely under control. Today had been a little bit busier than usual, but patients were all taking it in their stride and it didn't seem to be too chaotic. Now, the good news is that public hospitals across Queensland do not seem to be affected by this outage, and emergency services more largely, I believe, across the country are also not being affected. So that includes ambulance, fire and emergency, and also police. So if you need to call 000, your call will be able to get through. Now, we do also understand some pharmacies have been affected. Some pharmacies in Brisbane had to close earlier today because they simply just couldn't process scripts and medications for patients. But that seems to be a common story for many businesses across the country who really rely on this system. So.
Victoria Pengilly, that's actually the first glitch we've had in
Don't jinx us, Joe. Do not jinx us.
4 hours of coverage with none of our usual stories to play. Well, it's not bad that that's our first glitch.
Well, that was Victoria Pengilly joining us there with the latest on the... Oh, yeah. She's back, but I think we're ready to move on because we had enough of an update there on how the hospital systems are coping up there in Queensland.
OK, so let's take a look at the broad picture once again. Now we're at 8 o'clock Eastern time with this global outage affecting companies and organisations across the globe.
Yeah, we've heard responses from Microsoft as well as the government. Anthony Albanese is speaking, but just in the last few moments, the Home Affairs Minister Claire O'Neill has responded saying an unprecedented global outage of IT systems was caused by a CrowdStrike update to its customers and that a fix has been issued. The unprecedented outage is affecting banks, airlines, supermarkets, hospitals and media outlets outlets, including here at the ABC.
A national emergency meeting of authorities met earlier this evening, just in the last few hours, and CrowdStrike was in attendance. That's a bit of a surprise. CrowdStrike is a cybersecurity company that works to protect corporation security and stop data breaches, ransomware and cyber attacks.
Now, Minister Claire O'Neill says that the CrowdStrike fix will allow affected companies and organisations to reboot their systems without the problem. She says the company has advised that most issues should be resolved through the fix, but given the size and nature of this incident, it may take some time to resolve.
The federal government says there's no evidence that this is a cyber security incident, and there's been no impact to critical infrastructure, government services or 000 services. Some cybersecurity experts have told the ABC that this is the largest tech outage they've ever seen.
The impacts are being felt the world over, as we've been reporting tonight. Flights have been grounded at many airports in the United States and Europe.
And AJ Uni is the founder of Stickman Cyber, a business that helps companies mitigate cyber security risks, and he joins us now from Sydney. AJ, g'day. So first of all, this kind of developing news that we've had on this in the last hour or so is that Microsoft issued this statement saying that it was the result of work with CrowdStrike. Well, just for viewers who are just tuning in, listening to this story for the first time, just take us through what appears to have happened.
Yeah, so earlier today, what we noticed, systems were going offline, what we call as a blue screen. And it was not clear initially what caused the issue. There was our teams were looking into the issue for some of our clients, and then there was a notification from CrowdStrike stating that the most recent patch which went out caused this particular issue. So a patch is something, when you have software systems, you need to patch your systems with new upgrades and new updates. And this particular update, unfortunately, didn't go to plan, which essentially caused the issue for certain systems, which are basically Windows systems.
AJ, we mentioned in the introduction there is that your business is one that helps companies mitigate cyber security risks. Is there any way that this risk could have been mitigated?
Unfortunately, no, because it's out of our control, right? Basically, you're reliant on systems and processes which third-party vendors would essentially provide to you. One way this could have potentially been mitigated is you test these patches thoroughly before they are rolled out. And that's one way to mitigate such a risk. Unfortunately, in this instance, it affected a large number of computers, and possibly there could have been a more thorough test, but things are not clear why this happened, and if there was a technical way to mitigate this risk in a more comprehensive manner.
Yeah, but AJ, surely with companies of this size, tests that would have been done on this update would have been you'd assume they would be so thorough and so extensive.
You would imagine so, yes. But, we have seen a number of such situations in the past. We saw a situation with a large telco, which rolled out a certain kind of update which caused a complete network outage across the board. So sometimes it could be a human error, unfortunately. And yeah, it's just really disappointing and unfortunate that it has happened. But I think as an industry, we need to step up and work together to, resolve this issue and collaborate with each other in making sure things are restored back. And, with the size and extent of this issue, CrowdStrike has come back very quickly and also supporting our teams in terms of helping our clients and others in resolving this issue. So they've come up with a patch and an update on how to fix this issue. Obviously, unfortunately, it's Friday afternoon, and IT teams will be pretty inundated with requests to resolve these issues across the board.
Yeah, the timing's not ideal, is it, AJ? We're also joined here on the desk in Sydney by cybersecurity expert, founder of DVAL, Jamie O'Reilly. Jamie, I'd just like to check on you on that idea about, you would presume that these patch tests would have been done. Could this have been an issue where it was as simple as the patch testing wasn't done?
I think typically when you have the controls in place and you have a good standing, which CrowdStrike does historically have a good standing, we haven't seen anything of this size with CrowdStrike before. There could be other downstream providers involved in their software development process who may also be responsible. I think as time goes out, CrowdStrike will do a good job at kind of looking back in retrospect and sharing with the world what exactly went wrong. And as Alistair and also AJ has alluded to, this is all about working together and figuring out how do we avoid this.
What can you speak to around the potential reputational damage to CrowdStrike and Microsoft here?
Look, I think with providers like Microsoft, as Alistair said, when you're working with only 3 real major providers internationally, it's really difficult to just pick up, lift and shift and move away from that. But, look, with security providers, it's a little bit different. There is a much larger market to choose from. I don't know if this will take it this way, CrowdStrike has now learned this. It could very well happen to one of CrowdStrike's competitors as well in 6 months' time. They haven't had the experience of being able to deal with that. So there's both ways to look at it.
And AJ, with this patch being issued, are you pretty confident now that this will be resolved for the majority of companies in the next few days?
It should be. So our teams have tested it internally within our systems, and we have tested it with some of our clients. So that is resolving the issue. One distinction, what I have been advised by my technical teams, is if the system is online, the patch and the resolution can be done remotely quite easily. But if it's gone offline, then you actually physically have to be next to the PC to be able to go through a step-by-step process, especially when systems go offline to this extent. You'll have to reboot it in safe mode and then do the required remediation to be able to bring it back online. So there's going to be quite a bit of manual effort for systems which have completely gone offline to bring them back online, unfortunately.
Okay, AJ Uni, the founder of Stickman Cyber, thanks so much for talking to us.
Thank you.
Now, as we have been reporting, the impact of this outage is being felt right across the globe. So let's go to London now to our reporter, Michelle Rimmer. Good evening. Michelle, what is the impact there that you're seeing?
Well, this part of the world has woken to news of this global IT outage. So the full extent of the impact of these technical issues is still being realised. Here in the UK, trains and planes have been affected. The supermarkets, they've started to have some technical issues, especially at self-service checkouts. So we're seeing some chaos in these stores. We've got the London Stock Exchange is no longer able to provide its regular news service. One of the country's largest broadcasters, Sky News, it's been forced off air for a period of time. Hospitals and GP surgeries, they're only able to treat some of the most urgent cases. That's because they can't access medical records, so they're reverting back to pen and paper to make sure that the most urgent emergency cases are still being seen, but others have been delayed. They're not able to see the doctor at this point in time. And we've also had sort of more broadly across the country, there's been disruptions again at airports and at major transport hubs. So that's something that's really still unfolding. We're still hearing more and more about what's happening here in the UK. At Scotland, manual check-in is no longer working. So passengers are being told to get to trains and to get to airports earlier than they may expect to try and get through these manual systems.
And what more can you tell us about the flight situation across Europe?
So across Europe, at airports in Spain, in Germany, there have been incidents that have been reported at almost all of the airports. Again, this means that they've had to revert to manual operations just to try and keep things running. At this stage, flights are still going, but there have been significant delays. And again, people are being told to get there hours in advance just to make sure that they can get through these slower systems. More broadly in Europe, we're seeing technical disruptions in all industries. The German government has said that critical infrastructure and operators have been impacted. The Paris Olympic Committee have released a statement saying that they've been affected as well. However, they have contingencies in place to make sure that they can continue with their planning and preparations ahead of the opening ceremony in just 1 week's time. Poland has said that its main shipping container terminal is struggling to keep up with any incoming shiploads and is asked to not have any more containers dropped off. So we're really seeing broad impacts across a range of industries across Europe.
Yeah, and outside of Europe, Michelle, can you talk about some of the other major impacts across the world?
Yes, look, more broadly, it really is the airlines and airports that we're hearing from in terms of disruptions. Hong Kong has activated emergency procedures at its international airport. Airlines in Japan, in India and New Zealand, they're all reporting delays and significant disruptions, again returning to manual procedures. So this is really highlighting the need to have these manual options in place for if and when events like this occur. In the United States, the country's main airline, American Airlines, it's issued a global ground stop notice, which means that no new flights can take off, and that's been replicated at carriers across the United States, including Delta Airlines. So there's a lot of people in the United States and globally that are being affected by this unprecedented outage and are likely to continue to be affected over the coming hours.
Okay, Michelle Rimmer there in London. Now, over the last couple of hours, we've had this news that CrowdStrike has issued this fix, and we've just got some more information on that now, with CrowdStrike issuing a statement saying it's identified, isolated and deployed a fix for an unprecedented outage that has affected computer systems worldwide.
Yeah, the company says a defect has been found in a single content update for Windows hosts and that the Mac and Linux hosts are not impacted. In a statement, CrowdStrike CEO George Kurtz said the company is actively working with customers impacted.
He's made it clear this is not a security incident or a cyber attack that we've been hearing over and over the last couple of hours. Authorities and the company trying to assure people about that. We refer customers to the support portal for the latest updates, and we'll continue to provide complete and continuous updates on our website. But as we've been chatting to our experts over the last couple of hours, once again, just be really sure that what you're clicking on is coming from the right company, because hackers and nefarious operators will be using this as an opportunity to try to get to you. So when you go for that fix, just make sure it's from CrowdStrike.
Yeah, the CEO goes on to say we refer customers to the support portal for the latest updates, and we'll continue to provide complete and continuous updates on our website, being the CrowdStrike website. We further recommend organisations ensure they're communicating with CrowdStrike representatives through official channels. Our team is fully mobilised to ensure the security and stability of CrowdStrike customers.
And Jamison O'Reilly, what do you make of that statement from CrowdStrike?
Yeah, I think that's a good statement to make. I think they need to really hold the customer's hand here. The way that CrowdStrike works internationally, they do have distribution and technical partners throughout the world. They don't work with all of their customers directly. So if there's people working through intermediary security companies, the same advice applies. Rely on your trusted security partners for these updates, not through social media or other means.
And yeah, just a bit of a tech explanation of something that's like a little bit technical there for people who are not that familiar with computers. If you could just go in for a bit more information for us. So the company says a defect has been found in a single content update for Windows hosts, and that Mac and Linux hosts are not impacted. Just go into that in a bit more detail.
Yeah, sure. So basically, whenever you're writing software, typically, software you'd create for a Windows machine would be slightly different to an Apple machine. And that's because Windows and Apple, when they develop their own software, they do things a little bit differently. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. And that's why we're seeing this here.
Okay, well, we know that a national emergency meeting has been undertaken, and that's of authorities that has been held this evening. Political reporter Nicole Hegarty joins us now from Parliament House in Canberra. Good evening again, Nicole. Can you bring us up to the latest on the government response? What went on in this meeting?
Hi, Kath. Yes, so that meeting has concluded. It ran for more than an hour. We saw a statement at the conclusion of the meeting from Home Affairs Minister Claire O'Neill, and she said that CrowdSource were present at this meeting and that they did say, like we've seen in their statement just issued a few moments ago, that they have put forward this fix, but they say that it may take some time for that to flow through due to the enormous scale of this incident. So the fix is there, they say, but it may take who knows how long for it to make its way through. We saw within the ABC itself a gradual sort of rollout of the fix. So some of our computer screens came back online before others, and that seems to be flowing still, that process. So the Cybersecurity Minister and Home Affairs Minister keen to again reiterate that there are no signs that this was a cybersecurity incident, that it was instead due to this single update that was put forward. Claire O'Neill says that the mechanism that they used to coordinate responses, so this meeting that took place, the members that were at that meeting will continue to engage and provide any further updates as they come to fore.
So, Nicole, that is obviously the update of that very critical meeting there, but the government and authorities have been responding to this outage over the last few hours. Can you take us back to when the outage really started to impact here in Australia and what that response has been?
Yeah, so initially we didn't have a response from the government. We were making calls as we ourselves saw our computer systems and other networks go down. We then made contact with the Cybersecurity Centre, who were investigating the matter but not aware of anything at that time. Then we obviously saw the scale of this increase. Then we saw a statement come from the government that they would be calling this meeting. The National Cybersecurity Coordinator also issuing a statement saying that it appeared to be that it wasn't a cybersecurity incident, but rather due to a software update. The Prime Minister then issued a statement saying that he understood how concerning this was due to its broad scale, impacting everyone from trying to do their groceries and pay at a self-serve checkout to people trying to board flights. We saw extraordinary long queues at airports. So the Prime Minister keen to say that he understands how much of a concern this has been, but also we've seen across the levels of government a real focus on making clear that there has been no impact on critical infrastructure here in Australia. So that's different to what's been the case in Germany, as you just heard. But in Australia, there's been no impact on government services and also no impact to 000 phone calls.
All right, Nicole Hegarty, thank you for that update from the government response there and that critical meeting. Jamison O'Reilly, cyber expert and founder of DVUN, is joining us here on the desk as well. Jamie, how would you characterise what the response has been so far with respect to, at first we didn't know what sort of actor that was involved here, if it was going to be really serious and sinister or if indeed it is turning out to be what it looks like it is. Is this textbook the way that it's being dealt with? Because we know that it needs to be dealt with well in order to get through it.
Yeah, look, I think we're using the word unprecedented a lot, and I think that is the case. And I think so far I'm quite satisfied with the reaction and response times from Microsoft and CrowdStrike. But I'm really looking forward to seeing transparency from all parties involved to say what exactly caused this and what will be done to prevent this in the future.
And are the indications here now that they are being pretty upfront about it?
I do think so,
yeah.
And I think they can leverage social media like they are doing, because that's where the biggest audience will be in real time.
Yeah, because when emergency situations like this happen and there's silence from that's the kind of a really big issue.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so you'll obviously be advising your clients, and you've worked with a huge range of clients from international enterprise to government. What would you be advising them at this point?
Yeah, so if they are using CrowdStrike, I would repeat, make sure that you're only using official communication channels to receive these updates and progress that. And then also from the attacker's perspective, no doubt attackers will take advantage of this because of the disarray. So just be extra stringent. Yeah.
Okay, we will have a look at what's going around the airports now, but just a little bit of an update. We've just heard from CrowdStrike there and had some analysis on that. Some issues further away at home. We're hearing that Germany says its critical infrastructure has been affected by the outage. The German government defines critical infrastructure to encompass areas such as energy, transport and telecommunications. We know that the government here, Anthony Albanese, has said that no major critical infrastructure has been affected at this stage. We've heard about the NHS having issues. We've had some hospitals here in Queensland, private hospitals, being impacted, but not some of the public hospitals. So it seems to be a little bit of patchy, but airports is really seeming where a lot of the disruption is at the moment.
Yeah, and Sydney Airport issued a statement, this is a couple of hours ago now, saying a global technical outage has impacted some airline operations and terminal services flights currently arriving and departing. However, there may be some delays throughout the evening, and we've seen some pictures coming through of some pretty hefty lines there at Sydney Airport. We're sending a reporter out there at the moment to check that out. But in the meantime, let's go to Melbourne Airport. Michaela Ortolan is there, and it looks relatively quiet there now, is it?
It does look very quiet at the moment. We've heard from Virgin. They said that their systems are stable. A few flights have been cancelled, but they are working with customers to see them through those delays and any issues. I'm standing at the Qantas terminal at the moment. A few hours ago, this was packed with people queuing up behind me. Ticketing machines weren't working, conveyor belts weren't working, and people weren't able to check their bags in. That seems to have subsided. The conveyor belts are now working. And people are being able to board their flight. So it's a bit of a different scene than what we saw a little earlier today, a lot quieter here. But we do know that the impacts are still occurring, and there is that backlog of flights that they need to work through. So we might see delays for the rest of the night and potentially into tomorrow as well as they work through that backlog. The advice from the airport is to allow extra travel time, arrive here early and just be aware that you could face those delays and I guess potential cancellations. Hopefully they'll notify you in advance, but if not, just be aware that that could happen.
Okay, Michaela Ortolan joining us there from what seems to be a very orderly airport, something that perhaps is not playing out at Sydney Airport with some of the pictures that we have been seeing. We do have a reporter making their way there, but perhaps an update now on the situation that has really been unfolding since around 3 o'clock Australian Eastern Time today.
So, cybersecurity company CrowdStrike says it has identified, isolated and deployed a fix for an unprecedented outage that has affected computer systems worldwide. The company says the defect has been found in a single content update for Windows hosts and that Mac and Linux hosts are not impacted.
In a statement, CrowdStrike's CEO George Kurtz said the incident was not a security incident or a cyber attack. The unprecedented outage has affected banks, airlines, supermarkets, hospitals and media outlets, including here at the ABC.
A national emergency meeting of authorities met earlier this evening with CrowdStrike in attendance. CrowdStrike is a cybersecurity company that works to protect corporation security and stop data breaches, ransomware and cyber attacks.
Minister Claire O'Neill says the company has advised that most issues should be resolved through the fix, but given the size and nature of this incident, it may take some time to resolve.
The government says there's been no impact to critical infrastructure, government services or 000 services. And yeah, it was interesting to hear that some German critical infrastructure has actually been affected now. Some cybersecurity experts have told the ABC that this is the largest technology outage they've ever seen.
The impacts are being felt the world over, as you just mentioned there, one of those in Germany, but flights have been grounded at many airports in the United States as well as Europe.
And I might just take up one issue we mentioned there with Jamison O'Reilly, who's with us. He's a tech guy, tech expert. It was just interesting to hear, Jamison, that CrowdStrike itself was at that meeting with Australian government officials in Canberra tonight. I'm just interested to know what the company's presence, because you think of these big multinational corporations and you wouldn't think they'd necessarily have a big big presence here in Australia. But what can you tell us about their presence here in Australia, and have you had anything to do with them personally?
Yeah, so they have an international presence, a very good one. They do have representatives here in Australia. They work through both distributors and technical partners on the ground in Australia, quite a bit into government and enterprise as well. My dealings with CrowdStrike is actually, I think it is a great software, and they've done some really good job over the last few years, or at least decade, to prevent some serious attacks for some of my customers.
Yep.
And for some household brand names.
And so taking that into account, that from all accounts, this is a company with a really good reputation. Is it quite surprising that something like this has happened, or is it just inevitable with all the variables at play that even really reputable companies could be responsible? And we don't know exactly what's happened here, but could be responsible for something like this.
Yeah, look, I think just the nature of technology, there is a certain element of, unsurety to these type of things. I think we may find out that, on CrowdStrike side, their testing was fine, and then maybe another vendor or downstream provider, maybe Microsoft, release an update that they weren't expecting. The possibilities are quite endless.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay, so we've heard responses to this issue today from Microsoft, from CrowdStrike, also government authorities as well. The Prime Minister has spoken, the Home Affairs Minister, Claire O'Neill, has also issued a statement. The Cyber and Information Security Centre, which is part of the Home Affairs Department, has also responded, posting a video online, which is from the Deputy Secretary, Hamish Hansford. We can play some of that for you.
And I just might preface this for you, Kath, and for our viewers, saying this is the first time that we've actually played anything on ABC TV for several hours now, so fingers crossed this actually works.
My name is Hamish Hansford. I'm the Deputy Secretary of Cyber and Infrastructure Security at the Australian Department of Home Affairs. We've just finished the National Coordination Mechanism meeting this evening, where CrowdStrike briefed Australian Government, state and territory and industry representatives on the technical incident that's occurring. CrowdStrike are working on the fix. They've provided technical support to their customers, and over the next hours and days, we hope that this incident will self-resolve as technical responses kick in. There is no reason to panic. CrowdStrike are on it. It is not a cybersecurity incident, and we're working as fast as we can to resolve the incident.
Hamish Hansford there, the Deputy Secretary from the Home Affairs Cyber and Infrastructure Security Centre, and Jamison O'Reilly. I guess that's a good example of officials being upfront about what's happening and coming out and saying things in a situation like this.
Yep, I believe so, yeah.
Yep.
The transparency that you were speaking to before is seemingly playing out right now. Let's check in over in Western Australia to Perth, where we are now joined by our reporter David Webber to see how this is impacting there. What's happening where you are, David?
Well, obviously the national companies that are in Western Australia as well have been affected. Ramsay Healthcare, that's operates Joondalup Hospital, which is in the north of Perth. That's been affected, but WA Health hasn't. The emergency services are okay. Some government departments have been affected. I spoke to you a few hours ago and we thought that there was kind of an all clear, but they're still trying to work out what those impacts are. And there has been there's been a couple of cancellations of flights at Perth Airport. One before I spoke to you before, that was a Jetstar flight, and one since I spoke to you last time. There was a bit of crowd chaos there. People had to check in manually because the check-in systems were down. So the warnings were there, but of course people still turned up hoping to fly to places like Bali, and those flights were cancelled. We've even heard of people who found it difficult to get back from Bali to Perth. And we heard from on the radio, somebody called in and said that they had difficulty picking up some furniture. They were told they could go get some furniture from a local furniture store. They turned up and the item wasn't able to be processed. In the Perth CBD itself, we were there earlier, going around talking to people in the shops. There were no problems. I mean, life was going on as normal in the CBD, it seemed to us. We couldn't get to speak to everybody in every shop. Obviously, the banks were affected. There were people taking money out of the the ATMs and so on, cash. The banks seem to be not more busy than usual, but obviously, you know, some of the frustrations are only just coming out because we've learned about a lot more in the last couple of hours since I last spoke to you.
Leave it there. David Webber, we'll leave it there. Thank you for joining us.
And I think we can go to Darwin now, where we haven't got Thomas Morgan at.
No, I think we've got him.
We do have him. Thomas Morgan joins us now. He's initially we were speaking to him in the streets of Darwin. Then he was at the airport. Thomas is everywhere. He's back in the studio. So give us an idea, since you've been everywhere in Darwin, not necessarily across the Northern Territory over the last couple of hours, but yeah, what the impact has been up there.
Well, it's been significant for passengers on at least one flight out of Darwin to Adelaide this evening. That was cancelled. Passengers had to wait over an hour to find out what exactly had happened. Earlier in the day, we'd heard that a number of banks in the CBD and at least one major supermarket was forced to close its doors after what we understand to have been a failure of its self-serve checkouts, in the same way that many other businesses across the country have been feeling the impact of this cyber incident. Local government here in the Northern Territory, a couple of systems from the city of Darwin have been impacted, and we understand that there's been some impacts as well on some other systems here at the ABC. For instance, we had to suspend local broadcasting and take ABC Radio Adelaide. We haven't been able to put a 7 p.m. news bulletin to air here locally. And there's also been some issues with other news organisations as well being unable to do their normal things. So it has been a pretty disruptive event for many people. I was talking to a lot of people both at the airport and at that Woolworths this afternoon, and a lot of them were a bit bemused, not really sure why they couldn't access their online banking, for instance. At the airport, a lot of people were frustrated with Jetstar and a lack of communication from them about the situation, whether they were going to take off tonight, if their flight would be cancelled, whether Jetstar would be finding them a hotel room, or whether they had to go it alone and try and seek reimbursement down the track. So it has been a very chaotic day here for quite a few people, not least of all, of course, tourists who are making their way up here for the dry season and then trying to get home.
Okay, Thomas Morgan reporting there from Darwin. Okay, so let's take this opportunity now that it's around 8:30 on the east coast of Australia to bring you back up to date on what's happened over the last several hours with this major story. Initially when we saw our computers going blue, what's the description? A blue sign of death?
Death, the blue screen of death.
Blue screen of death started popping up here at the ABC around 3 o'clock this afternoon. And everyone was going, what the hell's happening? And then suddenly there was all these messages about companies going out across Australia and then internationally as well. And so, yeah, and as we've been discussing with our experts over the last several hours, this is probably, it's one of, if not the biggest tech outage that the world has seen.
Yeah, its scale and scope and where it's reached, not just here in Australia but around the world, but here in Australia, it's media organisations, it's banks, it's certain hospitals, it's aviation, the aviation industry. As we're seeing, people are leaving their groceries at the supermarket checkout because they can't pay. We have had updates from numerous sectors, from the business sector to the aviation sector as well, and it seems that in some areas there seems to be some potential getting back on track, but there are others where, particularly like at Sydney Airport, where the lines are snaking from what we've seen from the pictures out the door.
In the US, it's probably had the biggest impact there in terms of, we heard that like several of the big airline companies had grounded all their planes.
Delta, United, American.
Yeah, so we haven't had an update on what's happened with that since that announcement came through several hours ago.
Yeah, there is one small update from American Airline. They've later issued a statement saying it has re-established operations. Frontier and Spirit too have cancelled directives to ground planes, so speaks to that idea that perhaps things are starting to slowly, in some areas, change.
Yeah, that fix is working. And interestingly, Asia, we hadn't heard that much from Asia. We spoke to our reporter James Oaten in Tokyo.
James Oaten?
Yeah, and he was, I think he was in Tokyo, and the biggest impact there was a Macca's. So it wasn't too much happening in Asia that we're aware of.
At this stage,
I saw some indication that there was some big problems at an airport in India, but I haven't seen anything more than that.
Yeah.
We're just speaking to our reporter Michelle Rimmer in London, and
she outlined the breadth of that there, particularly the Olympics is coming up, and so we're only a week out from that. The Paris Olympics Organising Committee has said that the impact of the outage on its operations was limited. Ticket sales were unaffected ahead of the Games, which begin next week, but you would presume that some people might be caught up in the aviation side of things, being spectators, even indeed athletes. We know that Australian athletes entered the village in the last 24 hours. You were meant to talk to one of them tonight, I believe.
And we've had Jamison O'Reilly here with us over the last last hour or so. Thankfully, it's been really good to get your commentary. Just before you hit the road, just if you could take, since we've gone through this update just now, if you could just take us through what has happened with the identifying the source of this and the fix.
Yeah, so, initially there was confusion whether this was two separate issues, Microsoft and CrowdStrike. It looks like now both parties have come to the table and said, okay, we all agree it was a software update pushed by CrowdStrike only to their Windows hosts, not Linux and Mac, and the patches are now available. CrowdStrike has told their customers to strictly stay on dedicated communication channels and await that rollout. There is some challenge with rolling out the patch if the machine is off, which is requiring people to physically go to the machine and reboot it to apply the patch.
Okay, well, thanks so much for talking to us over the last hour or so. And Dr. Mark Gregory is an Associate Professor in the School of Engineering at RMIT University. He joins us now from Melbourne. So, yeah, things are looking up now.
Yes, most certainly. The patches, as we've heard, are being rolled out by CrowdStrike. But on the other side, we need to be very careful, of course, that the support channels are only with CrowdStrike. There will, of course, be a large number of scams that will follow this type of an event.
So obviously vigilance is the key here, and to make sure that all interactions is with the authentic CrowdStrike is critical. With respect to perhaps some green shoots that we're seeing here with there being a fix offered, what sort of time frame do you expect there to be until it is business back as usual?
Well, software like CrowdStrike's Falcon platform, it typically rolled out from a central part of an organisation. So they would generally be large companies or enterprise. They have IT support teams and IT teams that prepare the platforms that are distributed within the organisation. And so they should be able to quite quickly apply the patch and then roll out the updates throughout the organisation. As we've heard, a problem exists if a computer's been turned off after the blue screen occurred. The computer will need to be turned back on so that the patch can be applied. But generally, I would expect that this type of problem should be resolved by tomorrow morning. Obviously, IT teams are going to be working late tonight because they'll need to apply the patch. Then there'll be a lot of testing that will be required. And there'll be a lot of follow-up in terms of the processes and what the actual outcomes have been, including reporting. So I would expect by about midday tomorrow, things should be pretty well back to normal.
Do you that a company as reputable as CrowdStrike is probably the source of this, which has led to such a huge impact?
Well, I think that it highlights to us as Australians, of course, we had the Optus outage a few months ago, which was, a configuration and software-related problem that we are going to see software updates that cause issues. In this particular case, because CrowdStrike is a very popular security monitoring platform that is used globally, the impact has been global. We've got a massive number of companies within Australia that have been affected by this. The question is, of course, for government. Does the legislation and regulation fit this type of circumstance? Have procedures been followed? And the question of compensation will come up. Now, in some regards, we know that Australia is quite lax on regulation. We don't do very well when it comes to foreign multinationals. We don't appear to have the legislation and regulations needed to hold them to account to ensure that they follow good engineering practice, and that definitely has not happened in this case, as an inquiry should find. We would expect government to announce an inquiry tomorrow morning into what's happened. This has been a national outage, and it should be followed up with a suitable inquiry into what has occurred. The question of compensation needs to be looked at, and also what penalties the company should pay for this national outage. Now, this type of event should not occur. We would expect the ACMA to step in at this point, but I'm still waiting to hear what the ACMA is going to do about the Optus outage. The fines that they can levy are small, but they still can levy fines. And at this stage, we haven't heard anything on that front. Government, as I said, needs to consider legislation and regulation to ensure this type of event does not happen again.
Mark, I'm sure that the compensation element will form a huge component of that investigation there. And this might be too early for you to say, but do you think that this was just, from CrowdStrike's perspective, bad luck or bad governance?
Definitely bad governance. There's no such thing as bad luck when you're talking about engineering practices and processes, all right? We see bridges fall down, we see buildings fall down, we see major things go wrong if engineering practices are not followed correctly. Engineering teams are typically always under pressure, in the modern world. And it is only through regulation and governance that we ensure that that mistakes are not made. There should have been no rollout to an entire country or to the entire world without testing within CrowdStrike, and also testing on, for example, a company that has agreed to be a test site for that software. The idea that this update has been rolled out globally and has caused this sort of problem is unthinkable. Now, CrowdStrike's not the only company that's found itself in this circumstance. Other large IT and software companies have also found themselves in similar situations over the past decades. In every circumstance to date, Australia and our legislation and regulations have been found wanting.
Okay, Mark Gregory from RMIT, thanks so much for having a chat to us.
Thank you.
So this tech outage has caused widespread delays at airports around the country. It seems to have cleared up in most airports in the last couple of hours, but we've seen a couple of shots out of Sydney Airport, which seem to suggest it was still pretty busy there. So it'll be interesting to see what it looks like now. Reporter Ethan Ricks joins us. Ethan, g'day. So it doesn't look too bad behind you there?
Yeah, good evening, Ted. Well, it's kind of eased since the last time we came to you here from Sydney's domestic airport. A lot of those systems have come back online, but you can still see there's some relatively long queues behind me, and they're all at the Jetstar check-in. Some people are saying they've been experiencing some long delays here, been waiting for more than 4 hours, and they haven't heard a lot of communication yet to hear whether or not that their flight is going to be cancelled or not. But they're at the moment waiting here. The queue hasn't been moving too quickly, and they're pretty frustrated as far as they know. So continuing forward, it looks like everywhere else is kind of cleared out for now, but other than that, people say they're starting to get onto their flights and starting to be put through. Now, there's been more than a dozen flights that have been cancelled here at Sydney's domestic airport and across Australia so far, and there's been even more that have been delayed. Now, Virgin Australia says its systems are now back up and running and are relatively stable, so they've been able to process a lot of those passengers and put through them into security and get them on their flights. A lot of people, if they're waiting to hear what might happen to their flight, the best thing they should do is check online before they get here, and also check specific airlines as well, because it seems like this problem, as we can see here behind me, is being felt differently by many different airlines at the moment.
Okay, so yeah, relatively promising news there from Sydney. Thanks so much, Ethan Ricks there.
Now, we know that the impact of this tech outage has not just been felt here in Australia, but it's being felt right across the world. Our South Asia correspondent, Meghna Bali, joins us now from New Delhi. Hi there, Meghna. Can you take us through how this is impacting where you are in India?
Yeah, definitely has caused chaos here as well. I mean, our first indication, of course, was this morning when our office manager's laptop went down. Of course, the ABC's been impacted. But in the hours since, we've heard that major domestic Indian airlines, including Indigo, SpiceJet and Akasa Air, have gone down. Now, major airports, New Delhi, Mumbai, we're seeing absolute chaos out there. Now, we're hearing reports that people are getting manual boarding passes, you know, handwritten airport boards. It's like we've gone back to, you know, a few decades ago, and rubber stamping for security, these sorts of things. Of course, the banking sector has also been impacted. At least 4 major banks have reported some outages. We're hearing reports people, you know, having trouble accessing online banking, their apps, all those sorts of things. So the government has, the union minister has come out and said they're in touch with Microsoft and that they've identified what has been causing these outages, and on their end they have tried to deploy a fix. But as of right now, you know, we're still hearing reports that airports are pretty busy and the banks aren't back up yet.
And Meghna, no doubt you've been through those airports a few times yourself. For those Australians who haven't been, can you give us an idea of how busy they do get in regular hours?
Yeah, of course. I mean, India is a nation of more than 1 billion people. You can only imagine how chaotic it is on a regular basis to go through New Delhi Airport on any day of the week. You know, you're talking like millions of people going through these airports. It takes hours to get through security checks. And now, you know, you've got people manually processing boarding passes, rubber stamping your passports. I mean, you can only imagine the usual airport experience is definitely elongated.
So, Meghna, we're getting news here that this fix that CrowdStrike has spoken about is clearly being instigated across some businesses, and things are, at least at some of our airports, are starting to clear up somewhat. Is there any indication that that fix is happening across India?
Look, again, the government minister has said they've deployed it, but, you know, I've sort of been checking Twitter. We're talking to some of our sources around. I don't think that fix has been deployed quite yet. Airlines are telling passengers, you know, if you've got a flight within the next 24 hours to get in touch with them. So we don't see it easing immediately.
OK, we'll let you get back to it. Meghna Bali joining us there from New Delhi, India. Thank you very much. Well, let's bring in now futurist Mark Patchy. Mark, you've been sitting here patiently. Thank you very much for that. I mean, as a futurist, how do you think that this might impact on what it means for us to be so connected, so vulnerable?
Well, I was listening to the speakers before this. There's a famous moment in the history of engineering. It was the Tay Bridge that was built in Scotland in the 1850s. It was a railroad bridge. While a train was crossing it, it collapsed, killed hundreds of people. And it's because before that point in time, we didn't have formal engineering techniques. And what you see is the modern engineering schools that we have today, the technical universities that train people in credentialed mechanical engineering to build safe structures, begins from that. And I'm now wondering if the great glitch of 2024, whatever we call it, isn't going to be a similar moment when we actually take a look at, we have a connected world. We now need to start to think about how we engineer systems to thrive, not just to be rickety, but to thrive in that world.
So you don't think that's already been thought of? It's not like mechanical engineering and electronic engineering and computer engineering is a new thing.
Computer science, relative to the other engineering skills, is really only 40 years old as a formal discipline, right? When I was going to school 40 years ago, you get a degree in computer science, but that was really about learning how to write a programming language. It wasn't really about building network systems at scale. It's still relatively new. We think about the web. The web is still only 30 years old. Most of the world has only been connected by smartphones for the last 15 years. So actually, it is quite new. And so we haven't necessarily always had our eye on how to make these systems reliable at a planetary scale. And we've now gotten our first taste of what it means for them to not be reliable at a planetary scale.
At least we got the fix pretty quickly.
We hope. Yes. And the thing is, because part of what happens here is you get what a naval engineer would call the dead in the water problem, which is if enough systems go down at the same time, restarting them has to happen in a specific order. Things have to happen before other things, and you have to be very careful about that so that the systems can be synchronized as they come back up. You can't just flip one switch. And so I think while we may get most of the systems back up and running over the next 24 hours, touch wood, getting them running well may still take another couple of days as we work out some of the bugs.
We're talking a lot tonight about how dependent we are on so few companies at the moment, which is why we're seeing this huge spreading and impact across the world.
Yeah.
But do we really have any other choice?
Yes. I mean, we always have a thriving ecosystem of companies. We do tend to have a few major large players, but I think what we're starting to see, and in fact what I'm hearing from some of the largest companies in Australia, they're being asked to diversify. This is before any of this happened. Their suppliers in IT systems and in cloud systems, because it presents systemic risk to put too much in one basket. And I think we all got a big lesson in that today around we actually need to do this. It is more expensive to have many different kinds of systems, but it's also much safer. And so we're going to have to find a sweet spot between what safety is and how much we're willing to pay for that.
Yeah, we had the experience at the ABC of being able to do some things, being able to do them pretty quickly again, but then others we're still not able to do now. And one of our experts was suggesting maybe that's because we've got our different companies taking care of different systems, and that's an example of what you're talking about there, a bit of diversification.
Yeah, and again, that can be good in the sense that it makes them resilient, but if they both go down, right, because they were both using the same system, then you still have that same single point of failure that they're both succumbing to.
How do you think people then should be thinking about these systems? You mentioned before it needs to be planetary, global.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit more?
I mean, the thing is, when companies design systems, they design them around their own needs. And particularly if you have a system like a bank or something like that, it's going to design a wall of security around it. And it's going to think a lot about how it maintains its security, but it may not think a lot about all of the other systems that it's connected to. And I think at this point, we just have to act as though every system that we connect to is connected to every other system. And we can't assume that there's going to be a line beyond which a failure doesn't affect us, that if one domino drops somewhere, all of the other dominoes will fall.
I know you're a pretty positive guy. What are the opportunities that you see in this?
Oh, I mean, again, I think we're going to see the birth of a new kind of engineering, which is, we're not going to call it computer science. I don't know what we'll call it. We'll call it resiliency or whatever we'll call it. That will really then be part of, particularly for larger firms and anyone who's working at scale, will have that as a core member of the team, helping them to design these systems and probably also constantly poking at them to make sure that they stay up when they get knocked around.
So yeah, you think this could be that much of a landmark moment?
Well, it's the first global thing like this, right? So it depends, I think, on whether we can take the lessons forward. Maybe this has to happen to us another couple of times. And if we don't learn these lessons, it very likely will.
All right, well, we heard it here first with Mark Patchy, didn't we? The Chief Resilience Officer, the next new C-suite title that might be rolled out as a result. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, let's bring you an update of what we know so far about this developing story. And yeah, it started several hours ago, and it feels like the tech experts are getting on top of it now. And so hopefully that's the case. The Home Affairs Department says it hopes an unprecedented global computer systems outage will self-resolve. I'm not so sure it's going to self-resolve. There's going to be a lot of patching being done by individuals over the coming hours and days. Hamish Hansford, the Deputy Secretary of the Cyber and Infrastructure Security Centre, has released a message on social media after an emergency meeting of authorities tonight.
Yeah, he says there is no reason to panic and that CrowdStrike are on it. It comes as cybersecurity company CrowdStrike says it has identified, isolated and deployed a fix for the outage that has affected numerous sectors of our economy and society, from banks, airlines, supermarkets, hospitals and indeed here, media outlets, including us at the ABC.
The company says, that's CrowdStrike, says a defect has been found in a single content update for Windows hosts, and that Mac and Linux hosts are not impacted. In a statement, CrowdStrike's CEO George Kurtz said the incident was not a security incident or cyber attack.
CrowdStrike is a cybersecurity company that works to protect corporations' security and stop data breaches, ransomware and cyber attacks. The government says there has been no impact to critical infrastructure, government services or 000 services.
Some cybersecurity experts have told us that this is the largest technology outage that they've ever seen, and we just heard from Mark Patchy. He thinks it's such a landmark moment that it's going to lead to the birth of a new approach with some of these companies.
Yeah, the impacts, as we've been reporting to you this afternoon and this evening, are being felt not just here but the world over. To give you some examples, flights have been grounded at many airports in the United States, Europe and Asia.
Some broadcasters in the UK were taken off air. General practitioners in Britain's National Health Service have had booking systems affected, and we haven't heard that much about that, but the NHS is such a crucial system there over in the UK. So many people use it. You would have thought that would have caused some significant problems there.
And some German hospitals have had to cancel their elective surgeries. Let's, though, play that message from Hamish Hansford, the Deputy Secretary of the Cyber and Infrastructure Security Centre.
Hello, my name is Hamish Hansford. I'm the Deputy Secretary of Cyber and Infrastructure Security at the Australian Department of Home Affairs. We've just finished the National Coordination Mechanism meeting this evening, where CrowdStrike briefed Australian Government, state and territory and industry representatives on the technical incident that's occurring. CrowdStrike are working on the fix. They've provided technical support to their customers, and over the next hours and days, we hope that this incident will self-resolve as technical responses kick in. There is no reason to panic. CrowdStrike are on it. It is not a cybersecurity incident, and we're working as fast as we can to resolve the incident.
That is just another example of the response that we've been seeing from government authorities and organisations. That was Hamish Hansford there, the Deputy Secretary of the Cyber and Infrastructure Security Centre. Mark Patchy is here with us, a futurist. What are your final takeout and conclusions as we draw to a close on this broadcast? You know, what do you think people should be taking away from this? What are you taking away from it?
Yeah, I mean, it is still unfolding, so it's going to be really hard to know. But I mean, I think we already know that the systems that we rely on have vulnerabilities that we don't always think about, that they can be taken out very quickly by someone pressing the wrong button. And so we now have to think about if we've designed all of our systems to be that delicate, either we need to rethink them so that they're less delicate, or we have to be a lot more careful around them, right? And people are always going to make mistakes. But you know, there's this lovely line.
Human error, if it turns out being human error.
To err is human. To mess up at scale takes a computer.
Okay, thanks for that, Mark. And so just finishing with some important information, because earlier on we're hearing from experts that this is an opportunity for some malicious operators to try and take advantage of you. So just be really careful when you're going for that fix to make sure it is actually from CrowdStrike.
Yeah.
And Victorian Fire Services are aware that some residential and business buildings that have monitored fire alarms may not automatically call the fire brigade due to the current computing outages. So Victorians have been asked to call 000 if their building fire alarm is activated or if they see flames or smoke while the issue is being investigated by alarm companies. So just some really important messaging there as this situation continues.
Yeah, 000 is still working. It's very important to let you all know that. But thank you very much for your company here on ABC News as we've taken you through this major global tech outage. There'll be more coverage on the ABC as the hours unfold. But for now, goodbye.